So I'll open the meeting and then take the roll. So the statement we always read before these things is pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 20B, following Governor Baker's declaration of a state of emergency in the Commonwealth arising from the COVID-19 pandemic, the committee will meet virtually utilizing Zoom technology, and all votes will be taken by roll call vote. As you may have noticed, I've always done roll call votes alphabetically, so I remember to catch everybody. But in the interest of equity, we're going to do it in reverse alphabetical order so that Ms. Wheeler doesn't always come in last. So
you're only doing that because you forgot me last time.
Yes, I am. You know, guilt is a valuable tool.
I've never been able to go first in the roll call, so I'm excited.
Meg Wheeler.
Present.
Mary McGoldrick.
Present.
Helene Lieb.
Present.
Lee Jenkins.
Present.
Jean Healy.
Present.
Fran Collins.
Present.
Present. Dina Stino.
Present.
And Rob Hillman, I am present. So our goals this evening are to review warrant articles relating to zoning in the first part of the meeting, and then to pivot to the town hall article. Now, a brief preface before I turn it over to those who are visiting us to discuss the mechanics of the zoning articles. My recollection is that 4 or 5 of them are identical to proposed warrant articles for last year's annual town meeting. Those were vetted and voted favorably by the advisory committee, but they didn't go on the final warrant to save time at that meeting. They were all, I mean, you could call them housekeeping articles or ones that didn't change things in any sort of a material way. So I think those will be easy and shouldn't require, they didn't get much attention last year, and I don't think they're going to need much attention this year. There are 1 or 2 additional articles of the same sort, but there are 2 that really are substantive. So we're going to ask the members of the planning board and associated boards, including, I'm going to attempt its full title. I'll let one of the members of the master plan group, subcommittee on implementation and zoning articles tell us a little bit about what they're, who they are and why they're here, and what the position is on these 2 articles that'll probably be the majority of what we need to actually apply thought to. In terms of presentations, we've received and distributed materials that we've received. We understand that the planning board conducted hearings on both of these articles and recommended them unanimously. We're interested in a full presentation, but a brisk presentation, and leaving us time to ask questions if we need to. Who I understood, my initial contact was with Katie. So Ms. Dugan, do you want to start it off, even if it's to hand it off to Lauren or someone else?
That's great. Thank you. So I know many of you on advisory committee. Katie Dugan, chair of Master Plan Implementation Committee and member of the newly chartered zoning bylaw working group. So I'm going to hand it off to Lauren, who's going to take you through articles 21 through 25, and then article 29. And then the zoning bylaw working group will convene ourselves and take you through articles 26, 27, and 28. So Lauren, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Lind. I'm the planning director for the town. It's nice to meet some new faces here and also see a lot of you again once more. So just as a note, I distributed a brief presentation earlier today, but at approximately 5:30 this evening, I received a new copy of the warrant and found out there's only 28 articles now, so there are slight number changes. So this presentation is just a corrected version of that. So I'm going to share my screen briefly, and I'm going to do a high-level summary overview of Articles 20 through 24 and 28, and then we can pause for questions and get into any sort of detail that you may wish. So first is Article 20. Actually, I had previously numbered this as Article 21, so this will be consistent throughout. Article 20 is the amendment to the Floodplain and Watershed Protection District Amendment. This is almost identical to the article that was before town meeting last year. This is the one that's mandated by the Federal Emergency Management Association. And the difference here, though, is that this actually was carried through to annual town meeting last year when all of the other articles for zoning had been tabled. And the reason being is that this is a mandate. If any community fails to update this bylaw by the specified date in the letter of final determination, it constitutes an automatic removal from the National Flood Insurance Program, which is a tremendous liability to the town. So now that letter wound up being rescinded before it actually came through to annual town meeting last year. And the reason was that there were municipalities throughout the Commonwealth and also in Rhode Island that were having difficulty making that adoption by the specified date due to implications of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the difference this year is, in addition, last year we were updating map references to be consistent with updated insurance rate maps and in insurance study per FEMA. This year, they've also decided to update their model floodplain bylaw. So you'll see this year, there's more content related additions that are to be compliant with this additional portion that they've added this year. And again, the real takeaway here is that these items, I would suggest none of it is controversial in the content that's being added. It really is sort of procedural and policy, and failure to adopt this update by July 6th of this year would be the automatic removal from the National Flood Insurance Program. I'll move on to Article 21, which is the amendment to the ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations overlay district amendment. I won't say that 5 times fast. This bylaw was originally established to allow a solar array development atop the town's capped landfill along Cedar Lane, and the amendment here would add a second location to the applicable parcels that would allow for the potential for another solar array to be developed atop a capped landfill off of Crocker Lane in the Route 3A corridor. Article 22 is the zoning map update relative to the Whitney Spur Rail Trail reclassification. The Whitney Spur Rail Trail is a parcel located near Wampatuck State Park. It's currently zoned light industrial with a small portion of it that actually is zoned technology business. And the intent here would be to reclassify this parcel to be zoned as open space, which would be consistent with its current use. Article 23 is the fast food restaurant definition amendment. And the intent here is to add one single word to the definition of fast food restaurant, that being principal, to allow for clarification and interpretation of Zoning Board of Appeals special permits that request to have food components as an accessory use to a primary use. This is something that was actually brought to the Planning Board through the Zoning Board of Appeals last year. The Zoning Board of Appeals is the special permit granting authority for fast food restaurant uses. And the example that we commonly refer to is the Snack Shack at Sandy Beach. The explanation here is that the Snack Shack is an accessory use to the principal use, that is the recreational use of the beach and beach house. Therefore, the Snack Shack does not constitute a fast food restaurant. And I want to just clarify here, this is something that has been brought up by members of the public throughout the planning board hearings last year as well as this year. And I just want to clarify that this amendment would not expand applicable areas where this is an allowed use through a special permit through the Zoning Board of Appeals. Article 24, special permits in the Village Business District Amendment. This is an amendment to the table of use regulations regarding the special permit granting authority. Currently, it lists the planning board as the special permit granting authority for all of the uses in the Village Business District, with the exception of guest houses and veterinarian clinics, which currently go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's actually believed that this may have been sort of a Scribner's error in the latest update of that table. And what we'd like to do is make this consistent and would establish the planning board as a special permit granting authority for all uses in the Village Business District. Articles 25, 26, and 27 are going to be presented by the Zoning Bylaw Working Group. This committee actually, it's a working group of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. They're here tonight. They've really spearheaded these efforts regarding use variances, land alteration, and sunsetting of one of our residential overlay districts. So there's more to follow. I won't get into more at this time. The final article that I'll discuss with you tonight is Article 28. which is the Board of Health zoning bylaw amendment. And what this would do is amend every instance of the reference Board of Health to become Board of Public Health to be consistent with that board's official name change. So every instance in the zoning bylaw would be changed accordingly. Lastly, I'll just hover on my contact information here. I'm happy to answer any questions for any members of the public or anyone who wishes to speak to me about these articles or any process as we move forward through this. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and I will turn it over for questions.
Lauren, our practice is to restrict questions principally to the members of the committee. We don't get much of a public, but obviously, if anybody has something, we'd certainly consider it. So I see Fran first.
Yeah, just a quick correction. You mentioned that the solar array at the landfill was on Cedar Lane. It is not, it's on Cedar Street.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That would have come as a big surprise to the people on Cedar Lane.
It certainly would.
I apologize for the error there.
No, not at all. Like I said, I was liaison to planning last year, and all of these save one, I think, was on was before advisory, and we had approved them. Does anybody else have any question as to these? So I'll defer the vote on them until we consider all of the zoning articles at once, just so that people don't have to stick around and listen to us kind of go through along. So we could probably vote them in a group unless there's any objection to that. But why don't we plunge forward and switch over to the master plan working group. Katie, it sounded like you have a quorum and noticed this and need to open a meeting.
I do, thank you.
Then the floor is yours. Take it away.
All right, I'd like to call to order the zoning bylaw working group of April 8th, 2021 at 7:16. Roll call vote, present Katie Dugan.
Woody Chidick, present.
Tom Callahan, present.
Peter, you're muted.
Peter Pescatori, present.
All right, thank you. I thought that we could spend just a second sort of introducing ourselves. We are a relatively new committee. We were actually charged by the selectmen or select board last August. Many of you know that the master plan was completed and approved by the planning board in June 2019. Following that, the select board, in conjunction with the planning board, formed a master plan implementation committee whose job it is to coordinate and set priorities for the implementation of the master plan and really help gather resources and in some cases spearhead some of those efforts. When the master plan implementation committee was formed in January 2020, we set about looking at the 140 goals and strategies that are articulated in the plan, which are meant to be implemented over a decade. So it isn't like we have to rush to implement all of these. But on the other hand, since there are so many strategies, the idea was to begin to focus on some of the top priority ones. And so when we met with the Board of Selectmen last July and along with the planning board, we identified 5 top priorities: Elm Street corridor, sewer planning, various elements of the economic development chapter, affordable housing, and last but not least, zoning. There are 20 strategies that are in the master plan that relate to zoning. They span chapters on land use, housing, open space, and historical and cultural. And at the time, the Master Plan Implementation Committee felt that in order to really get some traction on a task of that magnitude, we needed to form a dedicated working group. And so we went and asked the select board to charge our committee with helping implement and make recommendations to the community related to this, related to the zoning strategies in the master plan itself. Our working group is like a previous ad hoc committee that did a lot of the zoning work for the town, but this one is formally charged and has replaced that. It includes myself and Kelsey Malatesta from the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Includes Jack Crichton, who is a representative from the Select Board, Woody Chittick from the ZBA, Paul Caleri from Planning, Tom Callahan from Planning, Peter Pescatori from Open Space and Rec. We have support from Jen Oram and John Hallown in Building and Inspections. So it really is a collaborative group, and obviously representing both master plan, but all the relevant permitting boards, along with some helpful perspective from the Select Board. So one of the first things that we did was actually lay out a set of goals for our working group. And we broke it into sort of the chunk that we thought we could accomplish in 6 months leading up to annual town meeting 2021. And then setting some medium-term goals of 12 to 18 months, and then some longer-term goals, recognizing that frankly, we couldn't tackle everything at once. And some of these would be projects that we would want to phase in once we got some momentum. So part of the reason for sharing this today is that we are going to be an active working group that continues to bring forward work for both consideration at annual town meeting, but also input into the community. So I think you guys are a great venue for us to kind of pitch our existence and the fact that we would like to get the community involved, especially as we start to fill out some of these 12 to 18 month goals around harbor zoning, housing options, and residential zoning. But in terms of what we're here to talk to you about today, it's 3 specific bylaws. One is use variance, the second is land alteration, and the third is a sunsetting of the senior multifamily residential overlay district. And the way we kind of think about this is land alteration is one that is clearly stated as a master plan implementation goal. Use variance is one of those that we believe will clean up how we are able to effectuate zoning and allow the ZBA to have perhaps the right amount of latitude in terms of uses, making determinations relative to uses and zoning. And then the senior multifamily falls in a relatively important, but perhaps unsexy category of cleanup. There is the last time that our zoning bylaws were actually recodified was 1989. So you can imagine that in the 30 plus years that have preceded that, a lot of additions have been made, edits have been made. And so as we go through this process, one of the things that we have committed to do is do some of that cleanup and some of that recodification so that our zoning bylaws hopefully work better and are more consistent internally and are accomplishing what the community would like to see in terms of the impact that zoning can have in terms of our community and land use. So with that, I'll just pause and see if there are any questions from the group. But again, we wanted just to take a second and introduce ourselves. All right.
I think we have a pretty fair idea of who you are and why you're here in your areas of expertise and goals. So I think probably pivoting to how these proposed articles work and work in the context of what you're doing would be the next logical thing.
Okay. Well, I am going to bring up specific language because I think in our case, it does get down to the devil is in the details. And hopefully you guys have copies of this in your packets. Town Council did come back today with some really small tweaks, which I've incorporated into the version that you're seeing tonight. But if there's any concern, I can tell you exactly what they are, but they're...
Katie, I don't mean, I apologize for interrupting, but I think probably starting with the broad view of what each article is intended to accomplish and what problem it solves would be a good preface to getting into language.
No, I absolutely. But
I just know my own limitations, so I'm really responding to those. Thanks.
No, that's fine. Again, I have this up there as reference, but our intent is to give you and the committee an overview of what the proposed article is intending to do and why we believe it's important. So the first one that we're going to talk about is Article 26, which is the use variance amendment. So just as background, for more than 40 years, our bylaws allowed for use variances in the cases where the zoning bylaws were silent on a specific use. In 2001, a motion on the town floor of town meeting passed that did not have any vetting by town boards, but changed how we interact with our zoning bylaws and prohibited variances in all districts for unmentioned uses. This motion from the town floor in 2001 had a number of unintended consequences over the subsequent 20 years and left the ZBA with no ability to use its judgment as it relates to current or potential future uses when cases came before them. There are a number of commonly accepted uses that are unmentioned and undefined in the zoning bylaws. The zoning bylaws are meant to state those uses that we expressly want to prohibit it. But in many cases, it doesn't state or envision in the future uses that could be acceptable to the community. But the language that was inserted in 12.5 in 2001 created a situation where the ZBA had no ability to grant permission for a use that was not explicitly stated in 4.2. What we are recommending here is that we actually return to the way our bylaws operated for 40 years and is the way that the bylaws operate in most municipalities. What we're asking to do is delete sentence in 12.5 that makes it impossible to authorize a variance for a use that is not strictly defined or stated in the bylaws, and replace it with a two-step process. In the case that a use is stated in the bylaws, a variance may be granted by the ZBA for that particular use. In the case that a use is not stated, we are suggesting with the language that it be replaced with a special permit process run again by the ZBA to authorize that use that is not otherwise addressed in the bylaw. And so that's the overview. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to Woody Chittick, who is chair of the ZBA, to perhaps highlight how this lack of a special permit process and some ability for their committee to use judgment as it relates to use variances and use special permits has created problems for the community over the last 20 or so years.
Okay, well, as Katie said, there are many, well, our bylaws are old, as we all know. And I'll give you an example that happened maybe 6 years ago with a veterinary practice that had been operating down in the village. A veterinary practice was not defined in the bylaws. A veterinary hospital for overnight stay was, and a dog grooming facility or pet grooming facility was defined. But because a veterinary practice was not defined in the bylaw, we were unable to allow the vet who is practicing today up on the highway to move there. This had to go all the way to the state attorney general to say, yes, those two bracketing uses are close enough so that it's okay to allow the ZBA to authorize a move of a vet. But we had to go to town meeting to do that, as I say, and then to the state attorney general. 2 years later, $40,000 worth of legal fees. Everything is fine. But this happens, I would suggest, 3 to 4 times a year anyway to the zoning board. Sometimes we find an analogous slot so that we can put something in there if it makes sense. Sometimes we can't and send the applicant away, regrettably. Just as other kind of strange examples, if you go to the harbor, the waterfront business district, you can have livestock down there. You can have farm animals down there, but you can't have a marine supply store. Now, nobody has a marine supply store today, but that's technically not allowed. Elderly housing is not allowed in residential districts. An assisted living facility like Sunrise is not allowed, period, because it wasn't thought of back in 1969. So this is a very this would streamline and allow us to apply our own judgment. Those of you who know about the zoning board know that we give variances once every 2 or 3 years out of about 100 applications, not all for variances, but it's a rare thing. But there are times when it makes sense for the community to have a use that's compatible with the neighborhood.
So I'll just pause here and Rob, at this point, just interject what the actual mechanism is. So the Article 26 is asking the town to vote to amend section 12.5 and eliminate the absolute prohibition on use variances found in that section. We are deleting the sentence, "A variance may not authorize a use not otherwise permitted in the district in which the land or structure is located," and replacing it with language in 12.2, which is the use variance, or excuse me, 4.2, which is the use variance section, stating, "A special permit may authorize a use not otherwise addressed in the bylaw. A variance may authorize a use specifically prohibited in the bylaws." And as Woody has suggested, variance process is a very difficult and rigorous test that is applied by the zoning ZBA. A special permit for a use not otherwise stated is also a public process and would have rigor associated with it. And again, we believe this is the right way to move in order to allow the ZBA to better function on behalf of the town and avoid situations that really don't need to go all the way up to the AG to allow a vet to move from the center of town to 3A when it's not a stated use for a 3A district. So with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions. Fran?
Just a
I
historical
see,
comment.
Fran, go ahead.
Historical comment. Dr. Gilbert, years and years ago, for many years, had a veterinary practice on Highland Avenue behind the Episcopal Church. So that's kind of interesting. I think that would have been covered as a pre-existing condition, you know, when we.
It would have been,
Yeah.
yes, in that case, but we don't have that many pre-existing conditions like that in town.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my historical comment.
Okay.
Other questions on that?
Since I'm presenting, I can't necessarily see everybody. I'm going to click off so I can actually get a better view of the crowd.
Sure. I don't see any hands. It seems relatively straightforward.
Okay.
So perhaps we could keep moving.
Okay, great. Just so you know, the planning board and the ZBA both voted unanimously after hearings on this to support the bylaw that we presented to you on use variance.
Peter Pescatori has his hand up.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, wouldn't it be a little more appropriate to vote on each one of these individually, since that's the way it'll be presented in the warrant?
We'll
Motion.
vote on we have an idea how we want to vote on our articles, Peter, thank you. Once the presentations are finished, we'll vote the various articles and take up any additional discussion I think that anybody on the committee wants to have. Does anybody on the committee have a different notion of how we should proceed?
Nope.
Okay, very well. Katie, if you want to continue.
I'm going to move us on to Article 27, which is the land alteration amendment. And I'll spend a second. I want to, as you stated, Rob, provide some context. So if you just give me a second, we put together a quick statement and then we'll talk a little bit more about the mechanics of the land alteration bylaw. The zoning bylaw working group would like to take a moment to provide some additional context regarding the land alteration bylaw. The master plan's zoning working group has researched how towns have approached this topic, and previous versions of this bylaw proposed in 2017 and 2020 by citizens petition and the Open Space and Recreation Committee. The zoning bylaw working group deliberately decided to take a phased approach to land alteration. The first phase being proposed for 2021 is adding limits regarding clearing activities to the existing bylaw governing earth removal. The working group has committed to research ledge removal as a second phase to the land alteration bylaw, returning with its recommendations in the near future. The zoning bylaw working group is carefully working every 2 weeks on a number of important zoning issues using data, legal counsel, community input from the master plan, benchmarking of other towns' efforts, and other objective criteria. The wholesale clear cutting of lots, especially before any building permits are issued, is an immediate concern shared by all of Cohasset's land use permitting boards, Planning Board, ZBA, the Conservation Commission. The existing stormwater management bylaw and the wetlands bylaw only deal with some aspects of this problem. The working group believes that regulating clearing activities is a critical next step. The zoning bylaw working group was able to analyze multiple examples of detrimental clearing activities in Cohasset, which showed a clear pattern of 1, clear cutting on undeveloped lots, and 2, clear cutting on developed residential lots when they were subdivided into multiple lots for redevelopment. In addition, the working group has made sure that this proposed bylaw uses measurement techniques that are consistent with the practices already used in town as part of the stormwater management bylaw and the scenic roads bylaw. The committee has done extensive benchmarking on 9 other communities who regulate clear cutting and tree protection to ensure that the specific bylaw language that we are recommending will pass legal review by the state's attorney general. The zoning working group is well aware of recent sentiments to include ledge protection in the warrant article for annual town meeting 2021. The zoning working group believes that ledge protection requires further study regarding what is the right type and the right level of regulation in order to balance the fundamental rights of landowners to enjoy and develop their property within reasonable limits with those of their neighborhood. For instance, a hastily crafted bylaw to simply prohibit all blasting and removal of large quantities of bedrock is not likely to pass legal review. And a flaw in one section of bylaw invalidates the whole, which in this case would invalidate clearing activities constraints that are needed now. Ledge protection simply needs more study. Rushing a well-intentioned but bylaw does not serve the community or the land use permitting boards attempting to enforce the bylaw in the long run. In conclusion, both the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals, after public hearings, voted unanimously to recommend the land alteration bylaw that's before you tonight for annual town meeting on May 24th. So again, I wanted to read that up front. I know that you guys received correspondence from a group of concerned citizens. Those concerned citizens were at the public hearing that was held by the Planning Board. We addressed all of their concerns and actually they've reached out to us and provided us with a starting list of some of the areas and lots that they're concerned about. So we now have some data that we can go off and begin to build from. So we appreciate their input and we do believe that this is something that we can look at. But as we said, we believe that we've crafted a bylaw that addresses the most clear and present danger around clear cutting activities on undeveloped lots and on lots that are being redeveloped and subdivided. So with that, I'm going to bring up the language and I will try and walk you through the major pieces of this section by section. Okay. All right. So the first thing that we wanted to just make sure that you guys understood is that this land alteration amendment is actually a revision and a replacement of the existing Article 11, which governs earth removal. And so in the bylaw itself, there are basically 2 things that are being governed. First, clearing activities, and that's accomplished in section 11.2. And then in 11.3, this is where the earth removal is governed. And what we wanted to make sure you guys understood is that the 11.3 activities regarding earth removal is the existing language that's in our zoning bylaws today, with the exception of the fact that under 11.3A1, there was a prohibition on the removal of not more than 10 cubic yards of material in aggregate from a lot per annum. And we have reduced that to a single removal, not a per annum. And we can explain our thinking more behind that. So really the replacement language that we're recommending here has two components: the clearing activities, which is new, and then the earth removal, which is essentially the existing language that's in our current Article 11 today. The second thing that we wanted to make clear is that we as a committee felt that it was very important to be able to clearly define what the problem was that we were trying to address. And as I mentioned in the statement that we read, we looked at 15 examples of detrimental land clearing activities in town. And what we found is that 70% of those examples that we were able to gather actually related to undeveloped or raw land that was clear cut in order to be able to be developed. And in 30% of the cases, it was actually developed land that was being subdivided into multiple parcels. And so we believe that there is a very clear problem statement. And in the past, when these land alteration bylaws have come up in Cohasset and in other communities, they've often been sweeping up all 2,700 parcels in town. What we're looking to address here is a subset of parcels where we believe that the land use and the land alteration is going to occur in the future. And that's why we've chosen to address it as specifically as we've done. So in terms of the mechanics of the article itself, what we are recommending is that clearing activities are able to take place except when they exceed a preset limit. And in the case of them exceeding a preset limit, the applicant must obtain a special permit from the planning board. The planning board is comfortable with this, and the planning board has actually already begun work on drafting some specific rules and regulations that would supplement what is already in the special permit process described in the zoning bylaws in 12.4 in order to be able to administer this. So again, the idea is that there's a limit. If you're below that limit, you proceed forward. If you're above that limit, you must go before the planning board for a special permit. And again, the special permit only applies to three types of scenarios, which I'll get to in a second: open space, undeveloped land, and when a developed lot is being redeveloped by being subdivided. So in terms of clearing activities in the second paragraph means the removal of trees that are 4 inches in diameter or greater. The reason we chose that as a metric, one was to make sure that what we were proposing was measurable. And second, the trees of a 4 inch in diameter happens to comport with what we have already put in place in the scenic roadways bylaw. In terms of how we plan on, or how we are proposing on measuring this, in terms of the percent, we're measuring this as a percentage of lot area that is being cleared. And that is being measured by the square feet of disturbed earth from clearing activities divided by the total square feet of the lot. That concept of disturbed earth is one that the town is familiar with and already works with engineering firms in terms of measuring and being able to diagram in the Conservation Commission process for stormwater bylaw. So we feel comfortable, and after having spoken with John Hallen as our new building inspector, he's comfortable that he can talk to engineering firms and talk to applicants about how we would like to see them be able to describe the percent of disturbed land if a applicant was looking to seek a special permit above the thresholds. And in terms of the clearing activities themselves, this next section is really where we lay out the details of what types of lots the clearing activities apply to, and what the exact limits are. So in A, one of the things that we did is we chose actually to exclude from the clearing activities any lots that are smaller than 18,000 square feet. And part of the reason is that small lots actually have unique development concerns. And when we further analyzed the data around undeveloped lots in town, there was a very small number of lots that were going to get swept up in that under 18,000 square feet. So we felt very comfortable that for those few that were going to fall below 18,000 square feet, that we were comfortable with the exemption. And again, recognizing that small lots sometimes have some unique development concerns. In terms of the lots that are covered by the clearing activities in 11.2, there are 3 types in B, C, and D. B is open space, and so that is defined as the open space district or any lots in land use code 200. One of the things that we chose to do was reference here property classification codes that are used by the assessor. So, and they're also standardized statewide. And so there's a whole PDF if somebody wants to read it around the revenue property type classification codes. But it's helpful because we can actually look at the assessor's data parcel by parcel and identify exactly what lots we're referring to. And in the case of the open space, there are close to 2,900 acres or 45% of Cohasset that is classified as open space. And for open space, as you see in B, clearing of lots is prohibited unless it's for a permitted or grandfathered use, which is covered under 4 in terms of exempt activities. In terms of what you might imagine a grandfathered or a permitted use, an example of that might be a forward stewardship plan. So again, the idea is that open space, there are clearing of lots is permitted unless it falls under one of these very few categories of an exempt or permitted activity. In C, this is the second type of land that's covered by clearing activities. And this is where we have specifically targeted the undeveloped lots. And the land use codes associated with those are the 130 to 132, which is residential lots, the 390 to 393, which is commercial, the 400s are industrial, and then the ones beginning with 0 are actually considered mixed use. So in this case, these are mixed use parcels, which include residential. And for undeveloped lots, we have set a clearing limit not to be exceeded of 70% on residential, which is RA, RB, and RC, and 85% on commercial, which are harbor business, light industry, downtown business, et cetera. And part of the reason that we chose the 70% in terms of lot area is actually already consistent with a measurement that we have in our bylaws today. In our water resource district in section 14.4C6, we actually have a limit that says that you cannot clear 70% of a lot. And the water resource district, for those that don't know, it is about 70% of our land mass and, excuse me, 2/3 of our land mass. So what we're suggesting here is really already a limit that is active in Cohasset, but we're applying it again to all parcels that are undeveloped lots in Cohasset. The third type of land that we are suggesting a clearing activity restriction on are residential lots, which are land use code 101, that are being further subdivided or reconfigured into multiple lots. So these are larger lots that again are being subdivided because they can become legally buildable based on size restrictions into multiple lots. And for those redeveloped residential lots, which were about 30% of the cases that we saw of detrimental clearing activities, we are suggesting that for, again, residential, that unless you seek a special permit, you may not exceed 70% of the clearing activity, 70% of the lot area in residential A, B, or C. So that is the meat of the clearing activities that we're suggesting here. Some of the other language in E is just suggesting a moratorium, so that once you've done the clearing activities associated with C or D, that you have a 10-year moratorium before you can clear further. So it really, it gets at a core of what could be a bad behavior by a developer where they cleared up to 70%, completed construction, and then chose to clear the remaining 30%. I don't think that's going to be the norm of what people choose, but again, it's just a protection for the town. In F, what we've described here are really the exempt activities, where you could, in the case of routine maintenance for hazardous trees or temporary work needed for storms or activities under the forest stewardship plan, these are exempt from the clearing activities described above. This is normal language that you see in other tree protection and land clearing bylaws. And again, it just allows a clear exemption for, in many cases, activities that are acceptable under other parts of Mass General Law or are common sense in terms of removing hazardous trees or allowing for storm-related work. So that is the clearing activities section. And again, as we've stated before, that is the new language that we're proposing. 11.3, as I stated earlier, is the existing earth removal language that is in the zoning bylaws today. The main reason that many towns, including Cohasset, and this is very standard language for most communities, is it prohibits an owner for turning their property into a quarry. In Cohasset, if you think back maybe to 1955, there might have been people that were more excited about quarrying the ledge or their materials for money. In today's world, the land is worth more than the removal of the rock. And so while we don't expect there to be many instances of quarrying in Cohasset, we do believe that keeping this language does serve a purpose in terms of restricting the fact that people cannot do earth removal except when they have a valid building permit, special permit, or stormwater bylaw permit. So you are allowed to remove earth, which includes soil, loam, and sand, gravel, or stone, but it has to be in connection with a approved project under a building permit, special permit, or bylaw, stormwater bylaw permit. Then in section 11.4, this really just goes through some of the application and review pieces associated with the special permit process. One of the things that we felt very strongly needed to be added, and we found examples of in many of the land alteration bylaws that we looked at, was 11.4a, which expressly prohibits land alteration activities prior to the issuance of building permits by the town, or written approval by the planning board or Concom, or the issuance of the permit that we're suggesting here in 11.2. We've all seen examples of this in town, and there's one currently on Windy Hill where the developer, even prior to passing through Concom or getting a building permit or through large home review, first thing they did was actually clear cut the lot of all major trees. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that there would be no land alteration before the applicant, before the developer actually went through all the approval process and there was an insured project that was going to go forward. So that's the intent of 11.4a. I think the only other thing that I would highlight here is under 11.4d. One of the things that the Open Space and Rec Plan and the Open Space and Rec Committee has been looking for is the ability to provide input on some of the land use decisions related to open space, but also related to conservation. So we added here in 11.4d, just a notification process to the Open Space and Rec Committee when someone submits for a special permit to clear more than 70% of a residential lot or 85% of a commercial lot. And again, the reason for that is that Open Space and Rec would be able to comment maybe perhaps about the nature of that lot in terms of a wildlife corridor or other aspects of it, and provide some perspective to the planning board as part of the special permit hearing process. So with that, I will ask my fellow members on the zoning bylaw working group, is there anything that I missed in my narrative that we need to cover for folks?
You're doing great. Just keep going.
Maybe I'll take a sip of water. Peter?
At the earlier discussions with the planning board, there was some comments about regulations to effectuate the use that the new bylaw. And there'll be open hearings to develop the required regulations. That's just a point that I thought we should make. The regulations aren't codified yet, but once the bylaw is approved, then there will be hearings public hearings to set the regulations for the town.
Yeah, I mean, and just so people don't get scared by that, I mean, the regulations will probably be mostly to the issue of what has to be submitted to get a special permit if you're proposing to exceed these clearing limits.
Right.
So it's going to be more about just about what kind of materials we're going to want to review for that, probably more than anything else.
So for my friends on school committee, of which there are many, the analogy is that the zoning bylaw is the policy, and the rules and regulations that the planning board will put in place are like the procedures that the administration would have put in place to further clarify aspects in terms of what the applicant needs to submit as part of the special permit process. So what you're reviewing, and which is the really important piece of it, is the bylaw or the pilot policy piece of it tonight. So with that, I will open it up to questions from advisory.
Very good. Jean, you had, Jean Healy, you had sort of taken our lead on these questions. Did you have anything that you wanted to, anything further, or perhaps anything that the advisory committee ought to hear that you haven't heard in Katie's and Woody's presentations?
Well, I think everyone's done an excellent job really sort of laying out much of what was discussed on the previous planning board hearings. I think the only thing that I would add is just a few points. So I'm not going to rehash anything that Katie has said, because I think, or Woody or others, because I think they've done an excellent job. But the single lot exemption that did come up during the planning board hearing and it's a question from the citizens who wrote the letter that we were copied on in terms of the 18,000 square feet exemption. And Katie, I forget the exact numbers, but I was impressed by them in terms of when you get right down to it, in terms of the number of parcels that fall within that can in fact be built on in light of the requirements in terms of square footage to build. It's probably 18 or so from what I recall.
Yeah, there are 209 parcels that fall in that undeveloped land category. 57 of them are 18,000 square feet or smaller. But of that subset, 38 of the 57 are too small to build, i.e. they're 9,000 square feet or less. So they don't qualify for the single lot exemption that Jean is referring to. So you're really back to 19 lots. And of those 19, only 4 are in RA, where you would need 18,000 to be a buildable lot. So the majority of those are RB, RC, where the lot sizes, unless they had a single lot exemption of 15,000 in the case of RB or 20,000 in the case of RC. So it really, again, comes back to the concept of we're trying to be very targeted, and we really felt that the 18,000 square foot exemption did not open up risk, but rather just kind of clarified that we're being very targeted.
Yeah, and there were 2 more points, although I'm happy to pause if anyone wants to.
Well, I would just emphasize, as someone who was involved in citizens' efforts around this in 2005 and 2017, this version of this bylaw has been developed with so much more data and analysis than in the past, that existed in the past. And it's been very, very carefully vetted by the boards this time. And I'm personally very appreciative of that effort that's been made.
Okay, I think I saw Helene's hand.
Yes, I'm very impressed with the work that you all have done. I just had a few questions about open space. I don't see any of this being a problem for our open space like Holly Hill Farm. That's under a conservation, I believe, you know, the acreage there. Is that correct?
Holly Hill, yes, it's under.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, and some of the other properties, there's not too many. And when you look at 18,000, I mean, square feet, I mean, that's, you know, less than a half acre. So I'm not, you know, over concerned about that. The blasting thing, you know, that really has been bugging me over the 40 years I've lived here. And I think this deals with some of that problem. I just think that the protection when they come around with cameras and stuff, it hasn't worked when you've tried to fight for repairs. So I think it's tightening up. We're not there yet, but certainly going in that direction. I'm still concerned about the blasting and some of the effects, you know, on the community, well, the structures of the homes around them.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody has a comment about that. Is this, you know, how much protection is this, these added bylaws are going to give towards that problem?
Well,
To be very clear, currently what you're looking at for this annual town meeting in phase 1, as we've described it, does not add any protections, Celine. But we have heard your concern and other folks' concerns and are going to look at ways to give ledge some protection. But one of the concerns that we have is that the outright prohibition of blasting or the outright removal of bedrock is not going to pass legal review.
I understand that.
And so one of the reasons that we've decided that we want to do further study on this is that we need to get the right type and the right level of regulation correct so that we don't trip over fundamental land ownership rights in terms of the people's ability to enjoy and develop their properties. But it's at reasonable limits within a neighborhood that we need to really get precise on. And we've, thanks to the efforts of some of the folks that inputted into the public hearings with the planning board, we've already got a small group of examples that we need to go off and analyze. And if there are examples of parcels that people have had concerns about in terms of what they've experienced in the past or what they've worried about in the future, to be clear, our ability, if as we kind of craft this, is largely going to be above grade ledge. The ability to regulate below grade or at grade ledge is going to be difficult, if not impossible, because of the fundamental rights of landowners. But we're looking at that above grade piece in terms of protecting the character and the topography of Cohasset and seeing how we can set the right parameters in order to be able to pass legal review.
Thank you.
Are you done, Helene?
Yeah, that's helpful. I guess we
Great.
have to go to the state level in order to get into the below grade.
There are a couple of things I want to keep our focus on the bylaw that's in front of us to recommend or not recommend.
Yep.
And it'll be interesting to get to those other issues. And thank you for answering the questions about them. But just to confirm, there's with respect to this bylaw and its text, there's been legal opinion given and approved?
Correct. Town council has reviewed it and he is comfortable with what we're proposing. It also comports with other bylaws that have passed and past Attorney General review.
Super. Other questions from the advisory committee? Jean Healy?
So I'm not going to go into the ledge versus not because I know it's not before us, although I think that your working group has the exact right approach, including because the law is evolving as we speak. There's a pending United States Supreme Court case that could very much give guidance to everyone in America on landowner rights. But you raised an interesting point that I just had a question on. Is there a severability clause within our bylaws? I don't think there is.
For what reason are you asking?
Well,
I don't.
if,
Okay, go ahead.
I'm only asking because if, for example, as the law evolves, if there is a part of, including in the land alteration bylaw, one specific part that is found to be questionable, it sounds like the concern is that the entire bylaw gets thrown out. But
Well,
typically if
no. One of the reasons the ledge piece of this was taken out of the 2017 proposal was just for that concern, that the ledge proposal was the trickier one, the more questionable, I won't say questionable, but the one that would have raised the most legal issues. And we wanted to take the clearing issue being an immediate problem and one that we can clearly regulate under Massachusetts law. We wanted to take that separately from that. If this particular section of the bylaw, this section 11, was to be challenged in a court, it's not going to throw out the entire zoning bylaw, or it might nullify section 11. But
Well, if I can just jump in the interest of time, I do think that while severability is, and I'm sure all the lawyers on the call, would love to take a deep dive into statutory construction. If there's a separate question as to whether we need to have a bylaw review to make sure that our bylaws are severable and otherwise impervious to being, blown up by a negative decision on a part, we should do that. But I don't think that that's something that is going to drive this vote on this warrant article. So,
and that's underway, Rob. That's underway. I can assure you that since we're looking at the entire bylaw, that kind of review is underway to make sure.
We look forward to having an advisory committee meeting that's all about statutory construction. I'll make cookies. Other questions from advisory? I'd like to kind of get us into through these. I think there's one more, but it's easy. And then we'll thank these nice people and we'll do some deliberating and voting. Okay. So are we to the last one, the sunsetting the overlay district?
We are indeed. Let me just bring that up, and hopefully this falls under the category of cleanup. So hopefully we can go through this really quickly, and we'll just make the case as to why we think this cleanup is important. Okay, so this is Article 28, in which we're proposing the sunsetting of the senior multifamily residential overlay district. Just as kind of background, the zoning bylaw working group recognizes the importance of maintaining diversity in our housing types, particularly senior and affordable housing, as this is part of the town's master plan and the housing production plan. However, the senior multifamily residential overlay district, when it was adopted in 2002, has resulted in 0 applications over the last 19 years. In addition to that, we will be recommending in the future, after the sunsetting of the senior multifamily residential overlay district, since it's been ineffective as an overlay at developing the type of housing such as senior and multifamily, we will be looking at zoning options to be able to accomplish this in town. And we'll make recommendations on this in the future. But tonight, what we're asking to do is sunset the senior multifamily residential overlay district, in part for 2 reasons. One, in the 19 years, it's had 0 applications. And then second, It was the intent of the town in 2006 to actually sunset this, but the sunset provision that was created and adopted at annual town meeting in 2006 inserted language in section 16.1b that created a legal inconsistency because the sunset provision tied the sunsetting to the development of the Cook Estates. The Cook Estates, not surprisingly, was not completed under Article 16. It was actually completed under Article 10, which was a different type of cluster development. As a result of this sunset provision language in 16.1b, unfortunately, we're sort of caught at this place where the developers cannot use this, nor do developers want to use this article to develop senior multifamily housing. And yet the town can't take it off of our zoning bylaws because it was tied to the Cook Estates instead of just a broader sunset provision. So what we're asking tonight for your approval is the sunsetting of it formally in a clean way. So we're recommending that the town vote to delete section 16 from the town bylaws and to make corresponding amendments to the zoning bylaws to delete references to the senior multifamily overlay district. So the vast majority of the language here is the cleanup in terms of deleting the references in other parts of the zoning bylaws. As an example, just one of them, in our definition in 2.1 of dwelling common multifamily, it actually references section 16.11c. And what we're doing here is obviously deleting the references to 16.c and replacing it with a very clean and tidy definition of dwelling common multifamily, which is an attached dwelling unit or buildings designed for occupied by 2 or more families. The reason that we chose that specific definition is it actually aligns with a definition in Article 10 for dwelling multifamily. So not only are we making there a single definition that is consistent throughout the whole zoning bylaws, we're deleting the reference to Article 16, which is going away. And the rest of the language here just goes through and does that in section 3.1, in section 4.3, and again, references some additional in 17.10 and 22.9. So again, a very simple cleanup in 2 parts. First cleanup is actually sunsetting formally all of Article 16 and then sunsetting or deleting references to Article 16 elsewhere in the zoning bylaws. So with that, I will
go ahead. Before I open it up for questions, just to sort of set the tone for questions, is there any conceivable reason why we shouldn't approve this instantly and without another moment's thought?
Not that I know of.
I'm sure that all of my colleagues have fly-specced the regs as thoroughly as you have to make sure that the bylaw, to make sure that all the references are good. It really is. It's just tremendously helpful to have some people who are willing to work at that level of detail, and we really appreciate it. I don't want to get in the way of it, but maybe one of my colleagues is more obstreperous and wants to dig down into 300.4.7/6 and argue about whether it should have a comma or not. So with that statement of the issue, does anyone have any questions on this sunsetting issue? I didn't think so. So that one was easy, and I'm sure it was a lot of work to get to it being easy. I remember it was supposed to be on last year's warrant, but wasn't because of this detailed work needed to be worked out, or maybe that was the Board of Health.
That was actually the Board of Health. I think it was
that was the Board of Health one.
Board of
Yeah,
Health
that's right.
change. It requires somebody to go through and do control find.
Thankless
but I
work.
think the bigger point that we just want to make sure is that it's not that the zoning bylaw working group is against senior housing or multifamily housing. It's just, unfortunately, the overlay district, as it was designed in 2002, has not allowed for that kind of development. And we believe that there are other ways to accomplish that. And that's what we'll be bringing forward as part of our housing options goal. And we'll be back to talk to you in 12 months about that.
I look forward to it. So does anybody in the advisory committee have any questions about this proposed article? Does any of the other groups who are with us have anything that they think was omitted from the presentation that we need to know? I can't imagine. So, good. All right. Well, then I suggest that what we should do is work my way back through my notes. That we, in as orderly a way as possible, work our way through the warrant articles that are to be voted. Chris, is it possible to put the language starting with proposed Article 20 on the screen?
I have the summary that Lauren circulated, if that's going to be helpful, Rob. It's not the exact it's not the full language, but it gives the summary of what you're voting on. And I think it's enough to make a motion, if that's helpful.
I suspect it is. I mean, it's, you know, technically we're voting for the language that's going on the floor of town meeting. So the legal formalist in me wants to have the language. Chris, go ahead.
Oh, I circulated the warrant to all of you a little earlier in the meeting. So you should all have the, and the language in the warrant I sent you is the language as reviewed, as presented, voted on, and then reviewed and tweaked slightly by Council Variances. So I can show it on the screen. I think you should all have it. And if you just want to, the simple, by the way, so this is like 15 pages worth of material over all the
articles. Then that makes no sense. I think it's your 7:07 p.m. email attaches the current, the most current draft of the warrant. So I'm downloading that right now. And then I think, Gene, we'll need a form of a motion for, for each of these warrant articles. And let me run this form of motion out, and then we'll see if it works for everybody. Will the advisory committee vote to recommend Article blank for approval by town meeting? Is that consistent with what we've done? Go ahead.
Just looking at what I've done in the past and what I've just copied 8 times.
Well, then we're using it. What is it?
Could I recommend motion for advisory committee to recommend to town meeting that it approve Article 20, and then you go through.
Got it. Okay, and we may be recommending them in the form presented in the warrant, which is consistent, I think, with
Rob,
how it's generally permitted.
Can we approve them en masse?
I think we can approve. We should be able to approve 20 through 24 and 28 in one vote, unless there's any other discussion. So why don't I ask someone for a motion that the advisory committee recommend to town meeting to approve Articles 22 through 24 and 28 in the form in which they're presented in the draft warrant for approval by town meeting. Somebody want to make that motion?
I second that.
Did somebody make it in the first place?
So moved.
Okay, Lee made it. Who seconded? Fran. I thought I heard Fran.
You did.
We have a motion and a second. We've had a presentation on those articles. Is there any further deliberation among the members of the advisory committee? Does anybody have any additional points of view? These are pretty non-controversial. So hearing none, we have a motion made and seconded. So roll call vote. Meg Wheeler.
I am not used to being first.
I know you weren't ready.
I was not ready. Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Colleen Lieb.
Aye.
Lee Jenkins.
Aye.
Jean Healy.
Aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Jean Estino.
Aye.
Okay, and it's a little out of order, but just in terms of ease, I'd like to make the same, make the same motion that the advisory committee recommend to town meeting that it approve Article 28 in the form that it's been presented this evening. I see Mary's hand.
I will move that, but Rob, did you vote on that first tranche of articles?
Oh, gosh, I didn't. I think.
Okay, there we go.
Oops, thank you. Being a vice chair who's on the ball is just the best thing. So we have a motion for Article 28, that having to do with the overlay district. Helene, is that a second?
Yes.
Helene is a second. Any further discussion on Article 28? Article 28, therefore, we'll move to a vote in which I will vote this time. Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Helene Lieb.
Aye.
Lee Jenkins.
Aye.
Jean Healy.
Aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Gina Stino.
Aye.
And the chair, Rob Hillman, this time is a distinct aye. So, all right, which leads us to Articles 25 and 26, which are more substantive, perhaps, but I'm not sure whether they are any more controversial or require more discussion, but we'll find out. I'm going to suggest that somebody move that the advisory committee recommend to town meeting that it approve Article 25 in the form that it appears in the current draft of the warrant. Do I have a motion?
So move.
I saw Gina Stino. Who's a second?
Second.
Meg Wheeler, the second. So we've had a lengthy and thorough presentation and opportunity to question the, I guess they're the proponents. Does anyone have any points for deliberation? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Tiresome as this may be, Meg Wheeler.
I forgot I was first again. Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Helene Lieb.
Aye.
Lee Jenkins.
Aye.
Dean Healy.
Aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Gina Stino.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman is an aye. Which then brings us to Article 27. I think we'll start with a motion in a second and then see if there's discussion. So will somebody move to recommend that town meeting approve Article 27 as it currently appears in draft warrant? I see Helene as moving. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mary McGoldrick. So, Chris.
I'm sorry, Rob, because the numbers have shifted a little bit. I just want to be clear that I'm recording these myself right. So the first motion was 20 through 24 and then 28, which is the public health change. Article 27 is now the change of the senior overlay. So I think you said 28 before. I just want to be clear.
Oh, then the
next one was the senior overlay. Okay.
That's correct. I should have been more specific.
The last one was the use variance.
25 is the use variance.
And this one is actually now Article 26, which is the land alteration amendment. I just want to be clear.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a question of reading my own handwriting, so I apologize. So, and perhaps being more specific is a better idea. So we're now voting on Article 26, which was the land clearing bylaw. We have a motion. We have a second. We had Katie's presentation and her colleagues' additional comments. Does anybody have any matters for deliberation on this, or are we satisfied that it is good to go forward with a vote? Very well. So then once again, get ready, Meg. We're voting on proposed Article 26, having how would you characterize this, Chris? What's the land clearing?
Oh, the land alteration, is that?
Land alteration.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all just have it fixed in our mind which one this is, land and things thereon. Good. Okay, Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Helene Lieb,
Aye.
Lee Jenkins, Jean Healy,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Gina Stino,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman is an aye. Thanks very much for a thorough presentation and getting things out to us ahead of time so we could educate ourselves a little bit. Thanks to Jean Healy for taking the deep dive on our behalf as a group. She was the principal liaison on this, and thanks for a thorough explanation that really didn't, I couldn't even think of smart questions to ask. They were all answered ahead of time. So we'll support this at town meeting where we expect it'll all pass. Anything further for us before we move on to the rest of our portfolio for the evening?
Rob, I think we have one more Article 27, the senior overlay.
Oh, gosh.
We voted on
Yeah,
that.
that's the one I think you referred to, Rob, as Article 28 before.
I'll move for the advisory committee to recommend to town meeting that approve Article 27, the senior overlay, in the form presented in the current warrant.
Thank you, Jean. Gina Stino, is that a motion?
I
Or a second?
already have that as moved by Helene and seconded by Mary.
That was 26. That was land alteration because there was an intervening discussion.
Yeah, I just got too cute with trying to move it through because we're a little past
Okay,
time.
I have it labeled 27, so that's
Yeah.
fine.
It's in the speed kills nature. I'm sorry. I was just
Gotcha.
trying to move it too fast. Okay. The senior overlay district article is Article 27. That is the article that was the last one presented by Katie, having to do with the removal of that language from the bylaws and a prospective revisitation to that concept as a part of the master plan farther down the road. We have a motion. It's been seconded. Is there any discussion about the senior housing overlay?
Who seconded? From my notes.
I thought Helene had.
Helene?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion, a second, discussion. Okay, very good. Then another vote. Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Lean Lieb,
Aye.
Lee Jenkins.
Aye.
Dean Healy,
Aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Gina Stino.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman is an aye as well. Okay, now all the nice comments that I made about thanks and et cetera, now that we've actually voted for everything you brought to us for approval, consider those revised and restated. Unless there's anything further, we're doing pretty good for time, and we have some people associated with the town hall discussion, which is another important matter that we want to try. Well, we will get through this evening. So thank you for all your help, and we'll move on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Great work.
We will hopefully be in person and we can bring cookies to the zoning conversation.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
As long as they're less than $49 worth a piece, we're
Yeah.
fine.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Rob, I have to go. I have an emergency patient I have to work
Well,
on.
I'm glad we were able to get you through that whole part.
Okay,
Helene.
and
So
if I
thanks very
can,
much.
I'll see how long it takes. But I'd be able to rejoin you. Take care. Bye.
Very well. This is like watching a hockey game when, there's a line change, everybody climbs over the boards and a bunch of other people jump on the ice. And here we are. This is a whole other lineup. We're going to have to prepare ourselves. Thank you very much. I'm pleased that we're more or less on time, notwithstanding the fact that I tripped all over a couple of those articles. We did get them done. We would like to get up to date on the town hall article. Chris, I'm looking at the draft circulated this evening of the warrant. Which article number is it now?
16.
16. Article 16 appears at PDF page 14 of 40. If everybody wants to give it a quick look before we get started, raise and appropriate, borrow to any applicable statute, creation of engineered design and construction plans for bidding process, reconstruction, or town hall, or any other action relating thereto. And the informational summary refers to an amount of $750,000 for that article. So I know that there were meetings as recently as earlier this evening, information session that I had attended before I had to peel off for something else. But I know Mary stayed all the way through. I think we'd be interested in hearing from the town hall committee, Don, and Chris, and then we'll move into questions. I'll ask Mary to take the lead on some of that, since I think she knows the current status of the project a little bit better than I do. But why don't we go ahead with the town hall committee? Phil, you or one of your colleagues, what do you got?
Sure. Well, thank you for having us again tonight. I was going to read the warrant article, but I don't need to now. Thank you very much. That takes my speech out of here.
Everybody likes to have a document read at them from time to time, so I thought
I needed something to do, and reading is about as far as I can go here. So we've got the warrant article in front of us. Mark Cameron's going to do a presentation, talk a little bit about the level of the schematic design that we're on now, give you a presentation of the town hall design as it is, walk through it. And then afterwards, we're going to have a little presentation from Carolyn. So, Mark, when you're ready, go for it.
Good evening. So just to give a brief overview, so far we've gone through the pre-design phase, which consists of programming and evaluating the existing conditions of the current facility, and also moved into schematic design, where we've looked at the site plan and put together some preliminary floor plans and exterior concepts. So this is a little bit tweaked since the last time we presented it. So this is the first floor. This side entrance here is the side lot currently, and there will be a single point of entrance. There's a handicap ramp along this side, and coming into a vestibule and an open lobby here where you've got the various departments here. We did change this stair around a little bit with an emergency egress door here out the front to help us accommodate the basement level for any future accommodations and needs there to meet the codes of egress for that certain number of occupants down there. This is the basement level. The basement level is probably the level that is going to be further developed in the future as we get into the further design phases and understand the mechanicals and where the mechanicals are going to run. But this is our first pass at the basement level. Much of Old Town Hall basement is really unusable due to the height and the cost associated with creating a height that would work for us. Here's a closer view of that basement level space. So again, like we said, this is probably the biggest area of the building that will be further developed through the further design phases. Here's the second floor. We've got the new annex side here on the right, and then Old Town Hall here on the left, showing the various offices. And this stair goes all the way from the basement all the way to the second floor, as well as the other egress stair here in the top right. Here's the overall site plan. So there's 64 parking spots in the current plan, which I believe is the exact same number of spots we currently have. We did do away with the drive out front. We've got handicap spots over here in the middle, closest to the walkway to the church. And there's a ramp that comes up along the backside of the building and into the single universal access into the building. There's just a little zoomed in. This is the updated egress walkway that is a code requirement based on the stairs going down to the basement to accommodate any levels of occupancy that we may have down there in the future. This will be further developed to understand what kind of material this is and have it blend in with the landscaping, as it's not a primary entrance. So this is the modification of what we are currently edited this past week, having that egress door here in between the two structures. And then this is that egress stair that goes all the way from the basement to the second floor. Another angle of that same area. We tried to do away with as much railing and ramps as possible, but this allows universal handicap access into both entrances of the building without any clunky ramps. And we'll further evolve this to see how many number of steps we can have and limit the number of steps through the design process. So there'd be a slight retaining wall on the back just to accommodate the grade change there. It's a slight grade change over the property from the corner of Old Town Hall to the back right corner, if you will, of the property. And so these last few spots here will be designated for handicap use and up the ramp into the main entrance here. And here's our emergency egress point from all levels. So this was the version before where we didn't have a stair down into the basement. So that was some of the changes that we made to better be able to fully utilize that basement level in the future should we need it. Just some older views of that same set of angles. And that's what we have for what we've come up with so far. Any questions in terms of the layout?
Yeah, I have one. Does that stair tower in the middle between the two buildings, does that have fire doors on it? It looks like it's open from the basement all the way to the second floor.
There is a door down on the lower level to pull it back up.
Just in
the first floor also.
In terms, Phil, of your team that's here, I just want to make sure we know who everyone is. I know who John Lemieux is. It's good to see you, John. We've spent hours on the phone together in completely unrelated projects.
As the Zoom was turning on, I said, I recognize that voice.
Yeah, it's distinctivly irritating, I know. So, so John is with Vertex. What's your role in this one?
We're the owner's project manager for the town, Rob, and Steve Kirby is with me as well.
I think I've spoken with Steve before as well. No conflict. We were both working for a common client, but it has, I can represent that. I think that the town's made a good choice with this team. So enough of Old Home Week. Any other questions from the advisory committee about some of these design choices? Lee?
Yep. Okay. One of the members said something about the basement. There was a height problem. It was is there a full height in the basement?
There is a full height. We originally had a height that was consistent with something that we have now. But due to the mechanicals and the structure, if we were looking to fit that out in the future, there would be less than ideal. And it was very an efficient use of dollars to go down another couple of feet. The real change was architecturally, we had to make some changes by having 2 stairs go all the way to the basement for full egress, as the code requires 2 forms of egress, which again, we currently don't have in our current situation.
Mary?
Mark, it might be helpful for the committee if you could just, if it's appropriate at this time, Rob, for you just to go through the process that you went through over the last couple of weeks since we last saw you, and the version and the design now that you're recommending going forward with. I think that might be some helpful context for folks.
Sure. So one of the questions that came up was the use of the basement level and making that fully functional. That was one of the process we ran through to see what we could do to get that. We ran through a design of adding light wells to get natural light down there and look at inhabiting that space. The cost was, there wasn't a big cost savings to do so. It also reduced the head count in town hall, and it was a study that was done, and it did not seem very effective. And so the basement full occupancy of the basement with offices didn't seem to be a very good idea. We also ran through eliminating square footage, which again, we didn't, we'd have to find somewhere else in town for these folks to go. Didn't see, we ran through the dollars and there wasn't a big cost savings there. So it was, it seemed rather foolish to head down further down that road.
Sorry, anyone else? Jean?
In terms of eliminating square footage, can you just sort of play out what you found when you were looking at, other people elsewhere? What do you mean by that?
Well, we looked at reducing the head count in town hall, and if we could find places for these people to, assuming they'd be located elsewhere in other town buildings. And so we did a study there, and we were deleting the square footage that was, again, is not very costly square footage. It's not the stairs, the elevators. So the square footage that was being eliminated was cheaper square footage. And, again, that comes at a cost, and to the efficiency wasn't there. It didn't save that much money at all. It saved a couple of $100,000 at best, but it didn't solve where those folks were going to go. Obviously, they'd need some space in town fitted out for them. So by the time we did that, again, I don't have the numbers in front of us tonight, but it almost seemed like a wash even after you'd probably fit them out with a space somewhere else in town. And architecturally, it was taken away from the symmetry that we designed in the building. Right now, the entrance on the side is in the middle, and we looked at shaving off 8 feet off the back of the building, and it just made it a little bit more awkward. It didn't flow as nicely. It didn't look as nicely.
Okay, thanks.
If I could just add, I think I remembered that presentation. I think that the savings to reduce the footprint netted out at like $300,000, which is just de minimis project of this size.
I think it was 204,000.
Yeah. So, but also it might be helpful, and I think you touched on it before, just to speak about how the program study is what drives the building, and keeping certain employees together and work units together and things like that is why you have a building where your town hall employees work together.
Yeah, I mean, we've fairly got the same services we currently have, but what the current setup really lacks is meeting space. There's not enough meeting space, and that's really fundamentally what we're getting with the new town hall is we're getting, you know, some couple of more offices, but we're getting meeting space that we don't have. And
we're getting bathrooms, and we're getting flow, and we're getting flexibility, and we're getting updated systems and insulation, and it's all good.
I do think that, you know, if part of the job description of the advisory committee is to make sure that the proponents of an article are prepared for the tough questions at town meeting, I would imagine if you're, you know, have your antennae up at all, you're hearing, you know, various people beginning to ask tough questions, perhaps not always particularly well informed or fair, but tough. I think we went over this the last time, but let me just suggest that making a compelling case for the need and the unsuitability of the current building and the notion that a repair to the new building is not a realistic option would be a key part of your presentation and public education campaign between now and town meeting. I think you really need to convince the taxpayers that what, you know, a building that's standing there and apparently functioning is shot. And like so many other things, you know, it's not that old and compared to its neighbor. And, you know, I don't want to belabor the point, but I would just encourage you to make the most compelling possible argument that, you know, that this project will need to happen, you know, and if not now, when, and if not this, what and this is the product of a lengthy and careful procedure standing on the shoulders of earlier lengthy and careful procedures that respond to the things that Mary talked about and Carolyn talked about, program and all that. I found those explanations to be very helpful. Just unsolicited advice, take it or leave it. Carolyn, I see your hand.
Well, yeah, hopefully she's
I'm
going
sorry.
to do her presentation now because it's probably a good time.
Presentation is a total overstatement, but it's a perfect segue for what I would like to share, which is
I'm sorry, did I get ahead of? I'll stop.
No, it's perfect, and you're absolutely right. And that's we just started our social media campaign a couple of weeks ago, and we are trying to mete out new information on a regular basis, and that is our next several posts are going to be, you know, this is what needs to happen in the old building. This is what would need to happen in the new building. As part of gathering information for that, Jason Federico and I, mostly Jason, he did an awesome job, worked through what it would cost to renovate the existing annex and bring everything up to code. There was a study done in 2018, which outlined all the different systems, you know, the electrical, plumbing, the HVAC, everything that would need to be done. He took those numbers and brought them up to 2021 standards based on the cost escalations from Turner Construction. And then he took the same, he looked at the AM Fogarty cost estimate that we got for the building that we have now, which is the baseline of the 13.15 million, and tried to use the equivalents for what would have to happen to renovate the annex. So he added in the other direct costs like general conditions, insurance, bonding, contingency, escalation, and profit to get the direct cost that we would need to renovate the building. And then he added in the architect and engineering, the OPM, furniture and fixtures, AV, security, advertising, legal, the temporary facilities that would be needed to move the employees while the work was being done, and then took that number, added on the contingencies, and the total cost to renovate the annex, just using that framework, it's just a talking point, it's not a bid or anything, would be $9,675,000. So, so we're looking at renovating the existing annex for $9,675,000, or building new at the, equivalent 13,156. We may choose to do some upgrades to the HVAC, whether geothermal or something that could bring that up. Could also be offset by grants for making the HVAC more green. But that's, I think, a very telling thing. It's basically $3.5 million more to do a brand new building that gives us the total flexibility, gives us the meeting space that we need, completely answers the program, or meets all of the needs in the program.
So it's really a $3.5 million project. So what are we doing here?
Well, the point is the town can have to spend money one way or the other.
I'm going to deem that to be a presentation, because that really is enormously helpful. John, I saw your hand.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's not just the 9.5 is the annex rehab and the old town hall rehab. The 13.5 is the new addition and the old town hall renovation. So the old town hall gets renovated regardless in either of those scenarios.
Yeah, that was my understanding of it, but I think the maximum clarity on that point is important. Other questions, Lee?
Of the $13 million, does that include the relocation of employees?
Yes. Yeah, because the direct cost of the construction for the new proposed renovation of Old Town Hall and new addition was right around $10 million for the actual direct construction work. It's all the soft cost contingencies, relocations, furniture and equipment, all that stuff that brings us from 10 million up to the 13 and a half, 14 if we go with the greener energy version. Again, which is to one of our points where we've said this is not a $10 million project, because either way, we're going to have those relocations and those designs and contingency costs.
Yeah, and each of those alternate workspaces have to be accessible. Each one of them has to meet all kinds of other requirements. We would be backfitting buildings we never use again for that purpose, seems to me.
And by the way, the EBI report did not include adding a second egress from the basement.
What's an EBI report, Carolyn?
Sorry, that was the report that was done in 2018, outlining all the things we have to do to the buildings to bring them up to code.
Thanks. Lee, I saw your hand.
Yeah, Dawn, is this going to be bonded over 20 or 30 years?
I was actually, Lee, that's an excellent question. Can I expand your question a little bit? I think probably we should turn to financing as a topic, which all leads to the answer to the question you just asked. What we're voting on is an appropriation to do the prep work, but I think necessarily the cost of completing the prep work is such a substantial number of dollars that the prospective entire project is an important consideration. So, Don, do you want to give us, and Mary, you might have some input from the meeting earlier, but if it's okay with you, Lee, we'll kind of get to your question in that context.
Do you want us to walk through the presentation a little bit, Mary, that we did earlier tonight?
I think the Reader's Digest version of that would be a good idea. There were two slides in particular. I think how you got from 9.5 to 7.2 is important for the committee to understand, and how this would fit in the budget.
I can do those too. And if you want, Don, do you want to talk through it as I present it?
Yeah, sure. So we're just gonna go through the 2 slides that we're talking about.
Right, and this is what you're talking about, Mayor, right? The pay down. This is the one that brings us down.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a slide prior to that that sets the stage, that's probably a good
Yes.
idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Chris and I, we spent some time yesterday trying to come up with a funding scenario that would help kind of show the committees in the town what it would look like to try to fit this within the operating budget. So where we start is a 13.5 number that we're getting from the Town Hall Building Committee. The prior CPC commitment, when this went to town meeting the last time, was a $4 million commitment, leaving us with about 9.5 left to have to fund. We started looking at, what would the timing be? So if we went and got the 750 to continue our work, that would lead us to a special town meeting in the fall of 2021. If that got approved for the full project, we'd start probably breaking ground spring of 22 and finish in fall of 23. So those were some considerations as we move forward to the next slide on how do we go from $9.5 million number and try to bring it down to a more manageable number that could fit into the budget once we borrow for it. So some of the things that we looked at were trying to fit things in over the next 3 years, because that's when we'd be done with the project. And for the most part would be when most of the borrowing would come to fruition, when we'd have to start paying it back. So to try to come off the top from 9.5, we're looking at some green energy initiatives. Michelle's working with, I believe, National Grid, green communities to see what options we have in potential grant funds. Looking at setting aside some free cash from our certifications over the next few years. I think based on our financial policies and what we've been able to generate for free cash, I think $1 million over the next 3 years is attainable. So that would be $1 million kind of put aside or put towards the project costs instead of borrowing for that million. So again, these are just coming off the top. Like I said before, 9.5 is what we're looking at currently. And then these are items that we're trying to just reduce that overall number. So the next item is trying to look at some of the capital projects that are getting approved and what alternative funding sources we have out. 2 that we specifically looked at are the school air handling. Deer Hill Middle School, High School, there's about $750,000 just approved to go to town meeting. We are working to go to MSBA to get some grant funding from them. Again, I don't know what the percentages would be, but we're going through the process now of getting an engineer to do their review of the sites, what needs to be done so that we can then go to MSBA to see what we may be eligible for. In addition to that, CARES money is eligible for air handler work. The ESSER grant money from that's been allocated to schools is eligible. And then we're also getting money from this most recent American Recovery Program, upwards of maybe $2.5 million. Now, my understanding and going through this with some state presentations is that they don't have they don't have the exact guidance for us, the communities or the counties. So we're still waiting on some information on what we can use it for. Some of the big things are, projects of construction projects, school projects. This falls under a school project construction. We're still waiting on guidance, but from our understanding, it's going to be kind of in line with what the Coronavirus Relief Fund eligibility requirements are. So I got an opinion from the state before we went through for this engineering work, and they said engineering and the construction costs would be eligible under Coronavirus Relief Fund. If this is going to be in line and in the same eligibility with the American Recovery Program, then we feel that there's a good chance that there's some money that we could claw back that was initially approved out of capital. Again, sorry for that long-winded answer there, but that's where we get the 2.3 million. So we're really looking at green energy initiatives, free cash over the next 3 years, and then trying to find alternative sources of funding for some capital projects that we could then repurpose to a town hall project. And then to Lee's question, Chris, it might be just worth looking at what the ranges are. So when we get down to it, 7.2 million, if all those things that we just talked about come to fruition, regardless of what the rates are now, we got to look 3 years, 2 years down the line. I like to be ultra conservative, especially for planning purposes. So we look at 3.75 right now. At 25 years, that would be 449,000 a year. At 30 years would be 404. Based on some of the other items that Chris and I have just kind of chewed on, we haven't, again, so trying to fit this into the budget is going to be a bit of a moving target and a bit of a commitment, but we've discussed some areas within the operating budget that we can try to fit in over the next 3 years to fit 450,000 into our operating budget without having to do a debt exclusion, without having to really impact the capital stabilization fund for their ongoing work and the projects that we'll need in the future. I think I pretty much kind of hopefully gave a shortened version of what we talked about earlier.
So for our purposes, if town meeting approves the warrant article that we're considering now, at what town meeting would the project financing be in front of voters?
Well, so it would be, without debt exclusion, it would just be at the next annual town meeting. So it would go to this annual town meeting we would do a borrowing authorization for the 750 to continue this work. And then the full project, from my understanding, would go to special town meeting in the fall, where we do the borrowing authorization for the entire project cost based on all the bid documents in the construction work, construction design and bid document work up until that point. So we'd have to work with our financial advisors. There's a few different ways of doing it. There's certain arbitrage rules where you can't borrow all the money up front because you need to ensure that you're going to spend that money within a certain time frame. And off the top of my head, I don't remember what that time frame is. I'm pretty sure it's 12 months or 18, but I've also provided spending schedules and plans to our advisors for only 6 months. So I have to double check with them, but there are certain requirements that prohibit borrowing all the money up front. So it would be more of probably a phased in approach. And again, depending on where the interest rates are at certain times of the process, they may advise us to do, half the project cost, borrow that up front. We're going to spend it in the next 6 months, borrow it up front if there's favorable rate, and then ban the rest until, our total project costs actually are known. That is still a little unclear, and we'll be getting some more information from our financial advisors over the next few weeks as we work with them on some other borrowing issues.
Thanks. I saw Jean Healy, then Mary McGoldrick.
So thanks, Don. That's helpful. The question a few questions, but I'll limit myself to 2 and then pass it to Mary. Has CPC actually committed to doing the 4 million?
They have not formally committed. I know at least discussions with Russ, it sounds like that they would be willing to go with the same commitment they did last time. Again, that's just one person on an entire board, so I don't know. I'm assuming they will. Just that's what they committed last time, and it fits within their funding allocations. Really, they have a good amount of money in their funds, and doing so, even based on the last commitment, I think it was $1 million that they were committing to in cash up front, and then borrowing $3 million over whatever the life of the rest of the bonding would go. And $3 million, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, it was a couple $100,000 based on their annual revenues and their fund balance. That's more than enough to continue on the work they do, providing funding to various groups in town.
So CPC will have to borrow money towards the 4 million. over
Yeah.
a certain amount.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like this is going to the ballot based on the current trajectory.
The current plan, again, a lot of discussion has been, we need to fit this into the operating budget, no debt exclusions. We're trying to, again, avoid impacting capital budget and their flexibility in approving ongoing projects for other departments in the future.
How does Kevin? Oh, sorry. I'll wait my turn. Someone else wants.
Mary?
So just to clarify, we wouldn't be theoretically looking at annual debt service of $400,000 to $450,000 a year until 2024.
That's what I would expect.
Okay. And is this the $750,000 that we would allocate? Would that then be rolled into okay.
Yeah, that would be rolled in. So the way it works, you have 2 years from the initial borrowing authorization of design and bidding work. So if we go to town meeting for the 750 now, it'll be 6 months later. So all of this would be wrapped into the one big borrowing.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Lee?
Yeah, Don, you quoted a figure for 30 years, about $400,000 a year for 30 years. That comes out to about 13 million. And then if CPC gives 4 million, and then you're talking 2.3, I believe that's pretty close to $19 million over 30 years. Is that correct? Or approximately?
Give or take. Again, I don't have those figures right in front of me, Lee, but yeah, the longer you bond, the more it costs. So that's why we had a 30-year option and a 25-year right now. And hey, if we get better news, we get better than expected results in certain areas, maybe we can pay down some more before we borrow and that 400 number becomes lower. Maybe we can borrow for a shorter term. But again, we're trying to see what we can fit into the operating budget. Some of the stuff Chris and I have looked at and discussed earlier today with another group where 400 to 450 seem to be reasonable at this point. So again, anything that we can do to better that number, maybe we can look at an option of 20 years. But for now, it seems like 25 to 30 would be the kind of sweet spot for where we can fit it in based on our current projections.
One of the questions, Don, is that money of, we'll say, $450,000 a year, does that also include the what do you call the maintenance fee for the bond?
Interest?
No.
Maintenance?
There's also a fee that is a fee every single year for bonding.
No.
Bonding fee.
No. Once you bond, you have principal and interest annually.
Okay. I'm pretty sure.
I've gone through it. I've seen it, Lee. I'm not lying. One thing that's different, we may get a premium, which is great. And if we get a premium on the bond, the way the Mass General laws allow you to work it out is that any premium can come right off the top and go towards project costs. It would have to be voted at town meeting. But, if we're borrowing $5-10 million and we get a couple $100,000 premium, that amount can go towards project costs and reduce that amount of borrowing even further as well. So, I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. There are some costs up front when you do borrow, but usually those are offset by that premium. That net premium is then what can be used to pay some of the project costs and reduce the actual amount you borrow.
Okay. Anybody else more? Jean?
So in terms of capital budget.
Oh, you know what? So I apologize, Gene. Leah, I think what you're referring to is Mass Water Pollution Abatement Trust, Mass Water Clean Trust. Back when they were doing the 0% low interest, they would have an admin fee. But that's not current. That's not a normal general obligation bond.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Chris, Helene is trying to rejoin the meeting. If you could let her in.
So Don, just on the capital side, so I did look at the 10-year capital plan that was a part of our advisory folder, and I see police station FY 22-24, I think 15 million. I mean, if we did something like this, could we replicate this same funding structure with a police station renovation, or is this sort of going to tap all of the town's ability on that front? You know, just because there's projects on the list that are looming out there, and there's some substantial ones in addition to the police station in terms of capital budget requests.
Right. I would say, you know, this is a lift, I think, to get this in the operating budget now and to avoid going to a debt exclusion. I don't really have a good answer for that, Gene. By the time we're done, we start paying for this. If that police station is right in that same time frame, I don't see how we could fit both at the same time. Again, you know, unless maybe the strategy that we're going with now to fit this in, again, at that time, maybe we make some tweaks to the operating budget. Maybe we can fit in another few $100 grand over a few years, but I'm not comfortable saying that now, as we're just going through these scenarios for the first time to try to fit another 400,000 just for town hall.
So how would you save that 450 out of the operating budget?
So some of the things that we talked about is new growth. We budget a somewhat conservative number, about 450,000 a year, as you've seen in our forecast. One thing that we were going to look at was anything in addition to that budgeted amount. So our assessor does a calculation every year of actual new growth versus our estimate. So in a year, maybe that we get 500,000 added to the tax rolls from new growth, we would use that $50,000 delta to build into the debt service budget, so that ongoing, that new growth delta stays in our budget as our tax levy going forward. So if we had an additional 50 in one year, an additional 50 in another, we could build in 100 over 2 years. That with a couple other items, we'd be looking at maybe some different ways of funding our OPEB. Instead of being within the operating budget, we might look at it as a total free cash appropriation each year. And then, you know, if there's other new revenues that come online, or, you know, we've been very conservative with meals tax and rooms tax because of the pandemic. If all of a sudden there's we're in a better situation with COVID and the pandemic, and there's more people going out to eat, more people staying in Cohasset, generating more revenue, we can maybe identify that as an additional revenue source that we could commit to that. So again, this is just an exercise that we're trying to at least show the committee that it can work, that we can. It'll be a juggling act, I feel like, but you know, it's a way for us to get there, and I think it's a reasonable way to get there too.
Okay. Anything further? Questions for Don or the committee or the professionals who are with us? All right. Well, we, I think, had started to move from questions to deliberation when we visited this at the last meeting. I think now we have language in the current warrant at Article
16.
Thank you. I think probably the appropriate approach would be to move it, second it, and then talk amongst ourselves prior to a vote. So I have a motion, looking for the language that we used earlier, that the advisory committee recommend to town meeting approval of Article 16 in the form that it appears in the current draft warrant. A motion to that effect?
So moved.
Mary, second.
Second.
Meg, discussion. Lee,
I'd like to bring up the fact that I think at town meeting, you should give town meeting the option to either remodel, since you have some of the numbers already, or the new system. So this way here, everything is done. If they want to remodel it, fine. If they don't, then you go with the new one.
okay. Does anyone else comments? Fran, I remember you at the last meeting, I kind of heard you and then kind of moving toward deliberating, making some points on the substance of the article just before we moved away. I didn't know whether you wanted to weigh back in. I feel like I cut you off.
No, that's fine. I think we need to just move ahead and get this job done. It's long overdue, needs to be done. Remodeling isn't going to do it.
Okay. Does anyone else want to weigh in prior to a vote? Helene?
I agree with Fran on that. I think we've tried in the past to look at remodeling and we costed out. And I support how the article as it stands.
Jean? Healy?
I have concerns about the financing, and this is not meant at you, Dawn. I think it's maybe not ripe yet in terms of understanding how the town is responsibly going to finance it. It puts it really close to the edge, including on capital budget projects. Not leaving a lot of cushion, including for things that happen in the future. You know, we're talking about using free cash, for example, where free cash is also being earmarked for other things like special education trust. You know, we're talking about pulling from the air handlers that are supposed to go to the school with the hope that we can use CARES Act money, which is not necessarily been allocated for that, but for other CARES Act issues. And so I think that the financing piece needs more development, needs more clarity, needs more precision, and it also needs to explain, because I do think a lot of people are asking how this fits in to other projects that are out there in the future, other big repairs coming up, like police and fire, like schools. I think these are legitimate questions and they're just not answered yet. And it's not because of any fault, you know, of anyone's here necessarily. It just needs more time to get those puzzle pieces in place. And I think provide people with some comfort there. And in terms of people, I have to say, and this is, again, no one on the Zoom call, but I strongly disagree with just having the plan to do this through town meeting, which I think probably goes to some of my concerns about the approach of financing here in terms of using the operational budget. I think it should be on the ballot. I think, including in light of what happened last time, there's a strong enough majority of Cohasset residents that felt strongly, and to have it occur a second vote for a big project that's going to impact Cohasset's budget for many, many years through town meeting, I think is a mistake, particularly during a pandemic where, you know, town meeting slightly attended. So I think in the interest of transparency, it really should be on the ballot.
Other comments? All right, hearing no further comments, I'll move to a vote. I'm going to assert my privilege of speaking last. Just very briefly, and if the vote is not unanimous, and I feel like it's possible it won't be unanimous, we'll make a statement to town meeting of the reasons in favor and the reasons against, with given due weight to the proportionality of the vote. I revert to my my opener, and my bumper sticker version of this is, if not this, then what? And if not now, then when? Jean's comments about, it not be, it needs more time, not prepared. There's substantively good thoughts, but I've, in my brief 30 years here, have seen, temporizing and extending and further study as a way to make project, to drown projects in a bathtub. And then, with respect, to financing, I tend to disagree. I mean, town meeting is is the core principle of town government. Override votes are an invention of the legislature, 300 years after town meeting started. So if the democratic process, my feeling is, and Gene, I think, it's not personal, as it's the alternate view is that, democracy happens where it happens. So those are my views. Fran, I see your hand and I'm happy to hear you.
Yeah, I just want to jump in again. We've spent close to $3 million so far studying this and looking at it from this side and that side, and back side and front side. And, we just keep spending more and more money on studying a problem that's still a problem until it's resolved. And I think it's, you've heard me say it before, I think it's time to bite the bullet and get it done. If something else has to take a backseat for a while, I mean, the police station, fire station, they're not falling down, but they're still adequate. That doesn't have to be done right now, but the town hall is in bad shape and it needs to be upgraded, repaired, rebuilt, whatever it is we're going to do, we got to do it.
Thanks for making my point better than I did. Meg, go ahead.
I would just say quickly, as someone who lives in numbers day and night, thank you, Don, for, I think, putting that together. I think that was really helpful. I think as a town, we've done well. I know I haven't been here that long, but since I've been here, I think we've done really well being conservative. And it doesn't make me nervous that we don't have all of those financial pieces together, because I think we have a lot of options. And I feel very comfortable moving forward that we will figure out a plan that works for the town. And to Fran's point, yes, that we have and to Jean's point, we have a lot of capital projects on the horizon, but I don't want to push one aside and then nothing gets done. I think we need to start dealing with them and figure out a way to make each one of them work as they come up.
Very good. Mary?
I would just offer that there's been a working group made up of the Board of Selectmen, Capital Budget Advisory, Town Hall Committee, Dawn, Chris, that's been meeting bi-weekly for, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months at this stage. And there have been really good conversations with capital budget. And I'm not going to put words in anyone's mouth, but it was all quite positive today, I will say. I think that's a decent characterization of the conversation. So that this isn't as much as I think our job as advisory is to deliberate this within our own committee. There have been very positive, broader conversations across some of the other boards that have been happening. So just so folks are aware about that.
Just to be clear, Mary, that was a meeting of the Cohasset Capital Budget Committee that you're attending?
Correct.
Okay. I'm glad to hear it. I was there at the beginning. I'm glad to hear it continued to go well. Gina?
I have to say, to Mary's point, this current working group has been working together for 2 years, but there have been off and on active working groups for over 3 years. I've been off the school committee for 2, and this was on the warrant. It's been on the warrant more than once. And as Fran said, we keep spending money and spending money and spending money and not getting anywhere. We've got toilets that don't flush there. This is ridiculous. I mean, if sitting in those rooms to meet downstairs, quite frankly, creeps me out. I've seen things, let's just say, really. So we need to have a little bit more momentum built up. I understand there are people in town who are bad-mouthing the project, but truly, pretty soon we're going to be meeting on tents on the lawn and have porta potties out there with a lot of hand sanitizer. We have to start so that we can finish instead of just keep going in reverse.
Okay. Thanks, Jean. Does anybody have any further comments? I think that people probably have are prepared to vote. So unless there's anything further, I'll move to a vote. Colleen?
I don't have anything further, but I would like to make a motion.
It's already been moved and seconded, hasn't it?
Oh, okay. I didn't.
Yeah, we moved and seconded, and then we had lots of conversation. So
Okay.
thank you for making us check up on that. But this time I did not make a procedural mistake. So I'm going to take full credit for that. But thanks. The motion's been moved and seconded to approve, or to recommend town meeting to approve Article 16 in the form it appears in the draft warrant. Meg Wheeler.
Thanks for making me first, Rob. I vote aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Colleen Lieb.
Aye.
Lee Jenkins.
Nay.
Dean Healy.
Nay.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Dean Estino.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman is an aye. So the ayes have it. We are still very nearly on schedule. No, we're not, but it's not tragic. I think we should thank the town hall committee, thank the volunteers, thank the professionals. John, you're going to miss the days of Zoom when you have to start driving to these far-flung communities to attend these meetings live again. I forget where you're at, but it isn't close to here.
About 20 minutes down 3A. Yes, this. No
Oh, are
problem.
you? Oh, okay. I was thinking about the project that we were talking about was an hour and a half from here. So
You are correct with that one.
yeah.
Yes.
So all right. Well, it's good to see you. It's good to see
You too.
Steve, Phil, Carolyn, the rest of the committee. Thanks very much. We've got a couple of things to try to clean up, but I feel like we've made enormous progress this evening. So we'll let you guys go.
All right.
And
Good night.
then-
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good night.
I know.
So, Hilly, oh, you're just waving him. All right. So I was going through the list of warrant articles and trying to figure out which ones we voted and which ones we still have to vote. Chris, the first two articles, do we even make a recommendation on them? I didn't think so. So Articles 3 and 4, we have to vote. They're the water and sewer rates. Article 5, we have to vote, which is the budget. And I propose we do so after the joint meeting on next Tuesday. The school committee will be there. We'll have done all the budget articles. So I'm going to do the same thing we did last time and notice an after part, a second meeting for ourselves to commence immediately after, simply for the purpose of voting the budget. I mean, honestly, the school budget, as a matter of law, is presented to us more or less as a fait accompli. It's not a system I like. It doesn't really render our opinion meaningful in any particular way, but we do it every year, so we'll do it again. Chris, on Article 6, unpaid bills, I understand there's a loose end.
No, it turns out there isn't a loose end, so you're all good.
Fantastic. That one's done. 7, the supplemental appropriations.
Yes, there actually is a loose end on that, and Don can explain, and if you and I can show it on the screen so people can see what we're talking about.
Well, actually, what I'd like to do is just.
Or do you know?
run the
Well,
list.
you just want to see what there are first, okay?
Right, and then see how we want to do with it.
Article 8 is done.
That's what I thought. 9 is done.
Did you vote that the other night?
Yes, we did.
You did?
We voted all the capital budget items.
Okay.
If I recall correctly, Jean has the fairly complicated vote because I think there was an abstention and 1 interior no vote, but it was pretty much all carried.
If you could just get
or
that
there's
to-
an abstention in CPC.
If you can get that to Tracy, Jean, that would be helpful. We're trying to get this warrant updated for the select board for Tuesday. If you have from 10 is done.
10 is done.
11 is one change. I'm sorry. I think Jean has a question for you, Rob.
Rob,
Oh, I'm
that was
sorry.
prior week's minutes that I just sent around Monday, right? We've had
Yes.
some meetings, I'm just trying to remember.
That would have been our meeting that would have been our meeting just
No,
2
those-
days ago.
The minutes you just sent were from April 1,
Yeah.
which was from the water and sewer hearings, which you should get a Pulitzer Prize for, by the way.
Thank you.
That was
So
a
April
lot.
6th.
So we don't
It's-
have those minutes yet.
It's the April 6th minutes that have those votes. That was the meeting we had after the joint meeting.
Okay. April 6th.
So we voted Article 12 is Chapter 91 liability. We voted
All right,
that.
just, so Article 11 is one change.
Right.
That was the tennis study, which is now fields and courts. So that needs to be revoted if you don't mind.
Yeah, we'll do that. Whether we do it right now or not,
Right.
we'll see.
12 is done, 13 is done. 14 was CPC. If you voted that, then you're good.
Wasn't there a loose end on CPC also?
Yeah, there was, and it's still kind of loose. So
It's the softball field at the Deer Hill School. So when they have something for us, we'll vote it.
Okay.
But so
And
that's done.
Rob?
Yeah.
On that item, I was also had a reservation about the town clock. I've done further study, and I would support that thing at this point.
Yes. Okay.
Rob,
Okay.
just an update.
Yes, Meg.
CPC is meeting Monday night, so on that particular issue. So we should know by Tuesday.
Oh, good. Maybe we can vote it Tuesday in our after meeting. So Article 15 is labeled Treats Pond and it's blank. And I gotta admit, I don't even know where Treats Pond is. So, and I actually spend a lot of time in the woods and swamps in this town, you know, in a tent. So
Atlantic Avenue.
What's that one? It's out there. Okay.
yeah, it's off Atlantic
Oh
Avenue.
yeah, I know where it is. Never mind.
And it's still placeholding for the moment. The goal is to get something for town meeting, but that may drag a little longer than the normal
Okay.
process.
Article 16, we just voted. Article 17, Water Department solar leases.
You need to hear that. This 17 and 18 are the two that you still need to get short presentations on.
Okay.
So.
All right.
About this. This is basically just like last year's warrant for the school roofs and that kind of stuff. This is just adding the water department site because it wasn't on the original authorization.
Okay.
So,
And then,
excuse me, Rob, are we going
Yeah,
to
Mary.
hear from Alternative Energy for that? Are they scheduled?
No, they haven't been. That's the thing. There's just two left. There's two left that you need presentations on. This is one.
That's just a late addition.
well, they can see us on the 15th. That was the meeting we didn't want to have, but you know, they're either ready then or they're not.
Yeah, I shouldn't be a problem. I don't think there's going to be any issue with that. It's not terribly complex. And then Article 18 is the amendments to the Affordable Housing Trust Bylaw. That would be next week, I guess, too, if you're going to meet on the 15th. So.
And we're going to meet on the 15th.
And that's not terribly, it's not complex, but the Affordable Housing Trust folks need to present it to you folks. So.
Sure. Is it about, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
So 19 was the South Shore vote. We
You voted that. And you've just done 20 through 28.
20 through 28. So the open, there's the water and sewer. There's some open issues on a couple of others, minor, and then there's obviously the budget.
Yep.
So I don't know how people feel after a 2.5-hour meeting, some of which followed other meetings. Is there a will to do the water and sewer rates and vote them at this point? We got a pretty thorough, excuse me, pretty thorough presentations the other day. You know, we could achieve the satisfaction of having them banged out, or we could, and I think that the Board of Selectmen is holding their, you know, delaying their vote until they've received ours. So maybe it makes sense to just do them. Yes, no, any opinions?
I am thinking that's probably a good idea if people have that appetite for it at 9:30.
Yeah, let's.
I would think they're going to try to vote that Tuesday after they hear after the joint meeting.
Okay, so why don't we look at turn to Article 3. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I heard somebody talk, but I didn't.
I'm sorry, Rob. Weren't we going to get additional information from the Sewer Commission on the average increase? I forgot if I forget if we ever got that. I can't remember. I know Meg asked for that, which I thought was a good idea. Just
And we got something, and now I'm forget, and I read it. I just don't remember. It was from
So,
Dawn that you sent
yeah,
us
that
the.
was the increase, that's what the impact on the 10% was on for the school
Yeah, that was
in
just.
town. I did work with Jason to run through what the average increase per quarter would be for the sewer department. And it came out to, again, this is an average. We didn't look at median. We were just trying to get some information together for the meeting. So comes down about over 20 billing periods, so about 5 years of data. Average cubic feet would be 2,200. So 2,200 cubic feet by 95 cents, which is the increase. $21 a quarter is what the average impact would be on the residents for that 10% increase.
Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
So would we like to look at Article 3 of the draft warrant, which appears at page 4 of the PDF. Pages of the warrant are not yet numbered.
Maybe, Chris, could you screen share that?
You're doing sewer, you said?
It's Article 3 is water.
Okay, sorry.
And Article 4 is sewer.
So you're doing water first?
Yeah.
My simple approach to things is to do them in numerical order, except voting, which we're doing in reverse alphabetical order. Next time it'll be by the first letter and everybody's middle name or something, egg. So it'll we'll keep mixing it up.
So do you need a motion, Robert?
This is the new chart that was provided us, and I think this has to be in the warrant because this is the fee. These are the rates. So
yeah.
I think we do this. I think probably we get a motion in a second and then see if we have any further discussion. So if somebody could move.
Okay. I move to make a motion to approve the water rate restructuring in Article 3.
I mean, I think probably the motion, if you don't mind, Helene, we're using sort of a form motion that the advisory committee recommend to town meeting that it approve Article 3 in the form of the warrant. Is that acceptable to you?
Yeah.
Fine. So Helene has moved. Do we have a second?
second.
Jean Healy. So any further discussion on the water rate? This is the water rate restructuring. Do we think I'm sorry, Jean, go ahead.
I thought that there was the lingering issue of, because they took out the school or the town municipal charges into tier 2, there was going to be a differential. And the question is, how do they address that? Was that through retained earnings, which I think was sort of the suggestion, but that was sort of, I think, the question mark that was left. Maybe.
My take on it, subject to correction, was that they had moved to take that out and took that problem on themselves. The commissioners will figure it out. Don advises that the impact on the water department is actually less than we thought by that move. It's closer to $25,000.
25.
So, I think it was an open question, but I think, not to be flip about it, but it's kind of their problem. So we'll figure it out. They're smart people. I mean, that's my answer. If somebody else is a better answer or I'm wrong, please speak up. Okay, well, stop the clock.
But thank you, Jean, for your detail. That's important. It's always good that we have that checks and balances. Thank you.
Further discussion. I do think I was going to say that, I think, the water department, they have a compelling story to tell, and in terms of why our water is relatively expensive, and it's history and geography and topology. But I hope that they, if they make it clear to people then that this rate increase actually doesn't represent a big delta over where people are at right now, no pun intended. There's a, it's a pretty reasonable article, it seems to me. I predict strife, but hopefully they'll be able to head it off, and I'm comfortable recommending it. So unless there's further discussion, do we want to vote Article 3? So we have a motion and a second. We'll do the voting part, starting with, let's see, Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Colleen Lieb.
Aye.
E. Jenkins.
Aye.
Dean Healy.
Aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
And Gina Stino.
Aye.
Excellent. The motion carries. So turning our attention then.
Did you vote, Rob?
Rob, you didn't.
Oh God, I forgot to vote again. It's been a day. I
It's a
apologize.
long night.
The chair votes in favor.
Going backwards on the alphabet's killing you.
It is. Well, I'm last every time. It shouldn't be that hard.
And
yeah,
I'm
it's
in
like-
the middle, long as I'm not the tallest.
Yeah, doing the alphabet backwards way too much like a DUI stop. So it's not that I've ever.
For what it's worth, I hate it, and I would like to be last.
Then so moved, granted by the chair. We'll go forward in the traditional way. So let's turn our attention to the sewer commissioner's proposal that is at Article 4 and page 6 of the draft warrant. Chris, if you want to put that on the screen, but while he's doing that, I think it would make sense to have a motion in a second, and then we can have discussion. So can I have a motion that the advisory committee votes to recommend the town meeting approve Article 4 in the form contained in the draft warrant?
So moved.
Mary Lee, you were leaning in. Do you want to second that? Somebody needs to second it.
I'll second it.
Okay, Lee then. Very well. Discussion points. Are there any? Go ahead, Lee.
I'll make it real quick. I think by coming up with 10%, I think it should be done over a period of time, but I'll still vote for this, but I just think 10% is a number out of the air. But it should be like 2.5 or 3% each year and bring it up to 10%, not just hit us with 10%. So
I tend to agree with that. I didn't think of it at the time, but smoothing it out at the time, but I did think that 10% is a big ask, even if it's justified. But this is what's before us. Other comments, questions?
There's a
Gina-
typo. There's a typo. It speaks to rats, not rates.
In a sewer article, that is
Exactly my
in
point.
the nature of a Freudian slip. Chris, can you note
I
that?
don't know about Freudian, but whatever.
I think Jungian.
It's in the first line of the
Um,
text that you just had on the screen.
Chris,
That was a test change to see if anyone's paid it. The rat per 100 cubic feet. Yes, I see it.
I'm happy to say my editing skills have not gone away. There are other things that have.
They certainly have not. But I think we can vote the article on the supposition that that town administration will do what they just did and change it. So we're good to go.
That was a really good get.
Rob, could I just
So
interject?
yeah,
So I agree with Lee on the payment shock, and you for that matter. I mean, it's a hard year for people, right? Like the pandemic has hit people in financial ways as well as health. And, I feel like our hands are tied. One of my main concerns though, and I don't know what other folks feel, is that I don't think that increased capital costs were necessarily accounted for, particularly where they're still figuring out their 5-year capital plan. And so we might be looking at a scenario where you do 10% and then there's a question mark whether the assessment was correct or not. And I don't have a solution for it. I'm just complaining, but that is my recollection from the last meeting, that they were in the process of the 5-year capital plan, and that none of these projections accounted for whatever they learned.
I think you're right. I think this is symptomatic of a broader problem with this town meeting cycle, and that is we're getting too much information too late. If our job is to vet things and make considered recommendations to town meeting, getting data dumps from our other boards and commissions this late isn't, I don't think it's letting us do our job as well as it should. And I think it's something that's going to need to be addressed. Now, granted, you know, it's an outlier year, et cetera, but I do think that if there's a special town meeting, we should address it. And coming into the next annual town meeting, we should really address it. And we'll talk about that later. I don't want to burn time on it now, but I think Lee is right. I think you're right. I don't know, and I'm happy to be corrected, but I mean, maybe we make, you know, we recommend the article, but when we speak to it, we speak to the fact that we would have preferred to see a graduated version of it. And we would expect in the future that these increases would be done with, you know, fill in words here. I see Meg, and I thought I saw another hand.
Yeah, mine.
So I don't disagree with anything anyone said, but I guess the way I was looking at it, this is an increase that should have happened 4 years ago in piecemeal. And so, I mean, I know it's not going to ease the burden for folks for whom this is a challenge, but the way I'm looking at it is we got 4 years of an underpriced rate when it should have in fact been higher. And I think to Jean's point, and your memory is correct. I mean, this is one of the questions I had asked last time. Is this just enough, or does this give us buffer? And the answer is it's just enough. And I think the reality is we, or whomever does this, really, I know it's tough to sell every year, but probably needs to push them to look at this every year and take it to town meeting, which I know is a tough conversation, but then we can have an increase, to Lee's point, of 2.5%. So.
Yeah. Colleen?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it was 2017 when they looked at it before and we had that increase. I think it was 10.5%. But the other thing is when we talk, it's really good, you know, even though let's say we have a, you know, unanimous decision, it doesn't mean we can't add our comments at town meeting. And, you know, I think in terms of this year, it was definitely pandemic driven, because what happened a couple of years ago, the advisory was clued in. John and I were working on that, clued in early on. I mean, remember, Chris, how we got on the agendas, we had speakers come, and then everything blew up with the pandemic and made it harder for us to be part of the process earlier and give the feedback to the different committees, different boards and stuff like that. So I think partly the lateness and some of the stuff that came out of it was because of that, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think it's a kind of a systemic conversation that we should have after that. But for now, anybody have any more thoughts about what to do about this article? I mean, we vote it. I suspect, as Lee said, we sort of have some misgivings about it. We voted favorably, but maybe on the next week we can talk a little bit about the articles to which one of us will speak, and which one I expect liaisons probably are the appropriate person. But also, some agreement. If there's anything that's disputed or we want to be careful about, maybe we should have, as part of the agenda, just talking about how those recommendation statements will be made. So, for example, on this one, I would be perfectly happy if somebody said, we're recommending it, but with a certain lack of enthusiasm for the way it's teed up. It needs to be done. We recognize that, but go on. Does that sound okay to folks for this? Are we ready to vote? Does anybody want to talk about it some more? Good. All right, then we'll vote this, and then we'll finish up. So the article's been moved and seconded. So roll call vote again. Gina Stino.
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Dean Healy,
Aye.
Lee Jenkins,
Aye.
Lean Lieb,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman will vote this time and in the affirmative. So we have completed, I think, everything at 10 minutes to 10. I think these loose end matters might wait. I see Chris holding up two fingers. Go ahead.
Can I ask if you would at least consider these two quick 7 and 11? They're very small. And I would help us wrap up the financial part of the warrant absent the budget. If you're not going to, it's okay.
If you having asked that way, I'm hard pressed to say no. Can everybody hang in for another very few minutes?
Yeah, 7-11.
Great.
And I would ask if Don, I'll put up Article 7 and Don can explain the modification.
We already had it.
So this is a supplemental appropriation to basically pay down. We have a couple band pay downs coming up. The largest is from the last town hall design project that we borrowed for $300 a couple of years ago. As I was explaining earlier, there's a time frame from when you start these things. So there was discussion at one point that the town hall project was going to be voted on and potentially go to this town meeting, which if it did, we could have rolled this $300,000 into that bond for that authorization. Since it's not going to town annual town meeting, we have to pay down 100 of the 300 as an annual band pay down. And then there's some interest related to a couple of the other borrowing authorizations that capital budget has authorized over the last few years. So this is really more of a cleanup item. We were hoping that this might all get rolled into the town hall project, depending on what happened. And that's really the justification for it.
Is that the $127,000 you're showing me?
Yeah, so of that, there's a band pay down of 100 for the town hall, another 16,000 pay down for Bound Brook Dam project that's has been borrowed short term. We're trying to roll some of these into long term, and then about another 11,000 of interest related to these short term notes. And so this is all when capital budget and when the town has authorized borrowings for some of these projects over the years, I maintain estimated debt service for 5 years in their schedule. So when they're looking at their analysis, these monies are already earmarked. So this isn't impacting any of their spending at this point. This is essentially just, again, if we had the hard numbers at the time, this would have been in one of the other articles either last year or at the beginning of this fiscal year. But again, this is just due to the timing of the project and not going through, just something that we have to pay.
Are we looking at Article 7?
Yes.
Okay. 'Cause it's
127.7.
Yeah. It's
Capital stabilization.
right. And the 183,725, that has to do with the cable.
We already voted that part.
Yeah, got it. So it's just the capital stabilization.
It's no small amount of dollars.
Right.
Are there alternatives to this? I mean, is this entirely routine, or is this something that we should step back and take a closer look at?
Routine in the sense of, yeah, I mean, did we know we had a pay down coming? Yeah. Were we hoping that town hall project may have been going through? Yes. So unfortunately, it was a last minute thing. I do have now that we know that town hall is not going this year. $100,000 a year of band pay down for this will be included in the capital stabilization transfer into the general fund in the next two annual town meetings. The alternative would be not approving this. By law, we have to pay the debt anyway, so we'd have to do a reserve fund transfer or year-end transfers at the end of the year. Either way, this needs to and will be paid. But it's really coming out, again, as capital budget is approving these projects, the mechanism is to repay it with capital stabilization funds. And which is why this is going forward as a supplemental appropriation.
So it's an obligation of the town that has to be
Exactly.
one way or the other, and you're recommending doing it this way.
Correct.
Okay, I think I understand that. Does anybody have any other questions for Don?
That explains it.
So what's the total outstanding amount we owe from the prior town hall plan
We'll owe 200,000 more.
on top of this 127?
300,000.
Hold on.
All right. I guess the vote would be to revise our earlier vote to recommend to town meeting that it adopt Article 7 as it appears in the present warrant, that is as revised. Does anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make it.
Lean, second.
Second.
Mary, further discussion? Okay, then we'll go to a roll call vote. Gina Stino,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Jean Healy,
Aye.
Lean Lieb,
Aye.
Lee Jenkins.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler, Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman is an aye. Only one alphabetical mistake in that one. Very well. Chris, you wanted us to look at Article 11 as well. One-time costs, fields and courts. This is familiar. We talked about this at some length. So just a quick update, perhaps.
Yeah, so the only change in this is the field and court study. It was just a court study. Now it's a field and court study. The select board has authorized it to double to 40. And this would study not just tennis courts, but also the expansion of fields in appropriate locations in the town and designing them basically. So you had voted for all the others. This was the one that was held. And that's the change. It went from 20 to 40, and it's not just tennis courts, it's fields generally.
Very good. Mary?
Just a quick question. Is there any impact with the, I believe it's the CPC potential funding for the softball field at Deer Hill wrapped in with, is there any? Okay.
That's an existing field that if it got funding from CPC, it would be renovated. This
Okay.
would study additional sites to expand and.
Okay, just wanted to see.
Fields, yeah.
Very good. Other questions for Chris before we bring a motion? Lee?
Yeah, we already have 2 engineers on the staff. I feel that we shouldn't be appropriating this money. This is not a technical, as far as I'm concerned, not a technical study. It's not really, it's just a study. I don't think we have enough engineers and people that we're paying for, salaried personnel that can do this type of work.
It's not a bad question, Chris. Is this outside of their?
Well, no, I mean, it's not that they couldn't do it, it's that they just can't. I mean, there's too many other priority projects right now. I mean, I can't clone Brian or Jason. Jason spends most of his time at the water department dealing with multi-million-dollar projects, and Brian spends most of his time dealing with multi-million-dollar projects. To put them on this would mean they wouldn't be doing other things. I mean, Brian is maxed out and Jason's maxed out. I mean, now if we actually build something, we probably project manage it internally. But at this, it's not, believe me, they're not field designers per se either. I mean, it's not, it's like you may be a doctor, but you wouldn't want to, if you're a podiatrist, I wouldn't want you looking at my eyes. Brian is a civil engineer. Jason is engineer trained. I don't think he's a PE at the moment. Though Jason has lots of experience with water projects and public work projects. So Lee is technically correct. They're most certainly capable of it at this point, though, if this work's going to get done. And the company that we have spec'd out does this work professionally. That's what they do. They work with universities and colleges and municipalities at field siting and design. That's what they do. So if I had more hours, it would be great. But we're not going to hire another body to do this. It just wouldn't happen.
The considerations we have with police over time, okay, it's a fair question. Each one of us can make our judgment whether it's a fair answer. Are there other questions before we bring a motion? Hearing none. Go ahead.
I know it's late, but I think there's a lot of people who want the field study, so I just make a pitch for it, including if it gets it done sooner rather than later. I mean, Deer Hill softball field is an example of the, part of the reason why it has to go back is in part because there's limited field space. And so there's this back and forth, right, between like, different groups that represent a lot of people in this town who want their kids outside playing, which isn't a bad thing. So I put my thumb on the scale for it just to get it done sooner rather than later.
Okay, then can somebody move to approve or revise our approval of Article 11 to recommend it in its revised form to town meeting?
So moved.
Mary, and then Helene, I saw your hand as a second, perhaps. Very well. Any further discussion? Then we'll go to a vote.
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry?
Who seconded?
Helene.
Helene, okay.
So, vote, Gina Stino,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Dean Healy,
Aye.
Lee Jenkins.
Everything but the study.
Okay, so we'll figure out how to carve that out when we make our recommendation. Helene Lieb,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler, and the
Aye.
chair. And the chair is an aye as well. Okay, so I think, thanks for your patience. Thanks for pushing us a little bit, Chris. We have, I'll circulate an email and a revised agenda, but I think on the 15th, we'll have a pretty light lift. We're back together on the 13th, Tuesday night, joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, the Select Board. That board has indicated to me that they're going to schedule their meeting at 6 with the joint meeting starting at 7, which is great. We'll notice a second meeting to follow the joint meeting. And I think we've discussed that it would be ideal to vote the whole budget at that meeting. And then if there are any of these other scraps that we can get to, we will. But I don't think we'll be able to push all the way through. If that changes, Mary and I'll let you know. So that's our discussion of upcoming meetings and articles. Does anybody have anything else?
Question, Jean, did you include in your minutes the financials on the town hall that was discussed? Some of that?
Like
today?
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, great, thanks. Because that's the only part I missed of tonight.
Oh, right. Yeah, you were. Jean, your hand is up, and then Mary.
Chris Senior, I'm just going to need your help. Unfortunately, so I had to take 2 sets of minutes. The second set for the April 6th advisory committee, which you need and want those votes, I overwrote it. It got messed up between the 2 sets. And so can you send me the video and I'll look at them again? The recording usually takes 2 weeks to get up on the website, but obviously we can't wait that long. So if you could have Christine do that, that'd be good.
We'll add that to the email request. I'll make it just Dean now to set up an extra advisory meeting for next Tuesday on Zoom.
I'll email you separately.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, if we will need a posting, Chris, can I just ask, I mean, we can probably do it tomorrow, but I'm going to have a bit of a day. Can your office just post us for the joint meeting and then a meeting after with a fairly generic, we'll consider and vote open articles in the second meeting? Thank you.
If we could just include, and I don't know if we do that now, a blanket statement about approval of minutes.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Without a date attached to it, just to cover our bases.
Yeah, I had started to put that at somebody's suggestion in every set, in every agenda. I don't want to do it now, but thank you. We should do that either on the 2nd, certainly on the 13th, the 15th, make sure we have all the minutes available to us approved. So, okay, so it feels like we're squared away for Tuesday. And I think we're squared away for getting our job done prior to town meeting, and we can talk about additional process on the 15th, not now. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Mary, go ahead.
Just a real quick question. Dawn and or Chris, has anyone received do we know the presentation that the school committee is going to give to the joint session on Tuesday?
Yeah.
I don't know. I did reach out to Patrick earlier in the week just to remind him that it was happening. And he said, yes, he and Susan were coming, but he didn't have anything. I will see. I know the school committee's already adopted the budget, so I know there's.
Oh, they have. I'm just, there's been a lot of, I'm especially curious just with staff, especially faculty, because there's been a lot of flux with teachers going, and there's a lot of open recs, and I'm just really curious about what that number looks like. And I don't know that they'll be able to tell us. I think it's pretty fluid still.
Yeah, to that point, I'd like to see, their detailed budget prior to getting in there and having them, run a PowerPoint slide deck past us.
Yeah.
Do you have whatever they distributed, Mary? Because I don't. I don't know if Don does either. Do you have it, Don? Do you have their budget?
I have I think Gina and I both have what they sent out prior or just after they approved the budget. It's pretty thin.
I think that they needed to do more work to it, Mary.
Yeah.
The document I received was for the budget document, so that would be a real pared down presentation. I just got it today. I haven't even opened it. I'd be happy to share it, but I don't think that's what they'd be presenting. That's more of a pared down version to fit into our overall town budget document, kind of summarizing.
Yeah, I want to see their backup. I want to see their detailed budget.
I mean, there's.
I think we. Go ahead.
There's a very small percentage of the budget that is fungible. So.
Oh, I completely understand that, but I think it's.
But I think as we were speaking about in the earlier meeting tonight, just they're having a technology director at the schools now, and is that going to be its staffed position from now on? I mean, there're just some things that I feel like, especially given our conversations surrounding the town hall, we really should be paying some attention to.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. It's half the money the town spends every year. It's actually a good deal more than half.
It's more than that.
Yeah.
And and I have some other questions, but not at 10:05 p.m.
139.
Pardon me?
Well, those were our school committee meetings, Jean.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but we'll, Mary, maybe we can have a conversation about sort of what would be the appropriate set of data for the advisory committee to have really by end of business Friday, so that people can give it a meaningful look before a meeting on Tuesday.
And if Don, if you could forward what you got, I'm happy to distribute that, and then we'll see what else we need.
Yeah.
I'll send that in just a minute.
Great. So, okay. Lee, I see a hand.
A motion to adjourn.
I couldn't have asked for more. Having been moved, seconded by Helene.
Rob, minutes?
We're not going to do minutes tonight, if that's okay with you, Jean. We'll, I think we probably defer minutes to the 13th when we've kind of a light agenda.
There were no votes in there, so I think.
That's right, the 14th.
There were no, votes on the warrant.
Yeah. Unless somebody thinks otherwise. I mean.
Can't think, it's too late.
Well, all right, so.
Seconded.
Helene seconded, Lee moved. Then we have a motion to adjourn. Gina Stino.
Aye.
Ben Collins.
Aye.
Jean Healy.
Aye.
Lee Jenkins.
Aye.
Lean Lieb.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman is an aye. So the